In the year 2365, humanity had reached a crossroads. The last remnants of Earth's natural resources had dwindled, and the atmosphere, once vibrant with life, now bore the scars of centuries of neglect. Yet, among the chaos and the crumbling infrastructure, a new power was rising, the United Earth Federation. Under the leadership of Chancellor Mira Albright, humanity sought not just survival, but a place among the stars. As Earth transformed into a hub of technological advancement, news of a distant alien empire known as the Thrax spread through the interstellar community. The Thrax, a formidable species of towering, crystalline beings, had long dominated their sector of the galaxy. With their vast fleet and advanced weaponry, they viewed the lesser species, including humans, as little more than a passing curiosity. Weak, they called them, dismissing the fledgling human efforts at interstellar exploration. But humans had a secret weapon: their resilience. The Federation scientists had spent decades developing a new form of energy vaporium, a substance capable of harnessing the quantum energy from collapsing stars. Its potential was limitless, and its use was shrouded in secrecy. On the surface of Earth, while the political and military leaders strategized, scientists like Dr. Ethan Marlowe worked tirelessly in hidden labs, pushing the boundaries of what vaporium could achieve. Ethan, a tall figure with messy hair and a penchant for sarcasm, often found solace in the lab's dim glow, tinkering with devices that could turn the tide of galactic warfare. As tensions mounted, whispers of Thrax ships patrolling the edges of human space reached Chancellor Albright. She convened a council of her top advisors in a high-tech war room deep within the Federation headquarters. Holographic displays projected star maps and battle scenarios, while a low hum of machinery filled the air. "Are we truly prepared for a conflict with the Thrax?" one advisor asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "They've decimated entire civilizations. They'll view us as a mere footnote in their history." Mira steeled her gaze, the weight of leadership resting heavily on her shoulders. "We have something they don't: ingenuity. They think us weak, but underestimating humanity will be their greatest mistake." Meanwhile, on Thraxia, the capital of the Thrax Empire, a council of elders convened to discuss the human situation. Their translucent bodies shimmered in the opulent chambers, surrounded by holographic displays of the human world. Elder Kreth, a stalwart leader with a voice like gravel, addressed the assembly. "Humans have made advancements." "Yes," he said, gesturing to the screen showing a small human ship weaving through asteroids. "But they are still fragile, bound to their carbon-based existence. They will fall before us." Another elder, softer in demeanor, countered, "We must not ignore their technological leaps. This vaporium energy could be a threat. We should observe, not act hastily." Kreth waved a dismissive hand. "Weakness is their nature. Let them waste their resources. When the time comes, we will crush them like the insects they are." Back on Earth, the hum of preparation filled the atmosphere. Every human knew that a confrontation was inevitable. As Ethan watched a test of vaporium weaponry from the observation deck, he felt a mix of hope and dread. The weapon, a sleek, black module capable of channeling vaporium energy into a focused beam, glimmered ominously. "Is it ready?" Mira asked, joining him on the deck. Ethan turned, a hint of a smile breaking through his furrowed brow. "As ready as we can make it. The first tests showed promising results, but there's a fine line between power and destruction. If we use it incorrectly..." Mira nodded. "We'll have to strike first. If we wait for the Thrax to come to us, we may not survive. The element of surprise is our best advantage." With a determined glint in her eye, she made a decision that would alter the course of human history. A fleet was to be assembled, ships retrofitted with vaporium technology, and the first strike was to be launched at the Thrax patrol vessels encroaching on human territory. As dawn broke across the war room, the mood shifted from anxiety to resolve. Crews worked tirelessly, modifying ships and loading them with vaporium weaponry. Morale soared as the realization set in: humanity was no longer a passive observer in the cosmos. They were ready to take their stand. The day of the first strike arrived. A fleet of sleek ships, their hulls gleaming under the twin suns of Earth, assembled in orbit. Ethan stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Hughes Intrepid, alongside Mira. The vastness of space lay before them, dotted with the stars they had gazed at for centuries, now poised to become the battleground for their survival. "Prepare for launch," Mira ordered, her voice steady despite the tremors of fear running through her. "We move now." With a roar of engines, the Intrepid and its fleet surged forward, breaking the gravitational bonds of Earth. The stars enveloped them as they hurtled toward the Thrax border, anticipation crackling in the air. As they approached, Ethan's heart raced. They could see the patrol ships, massive structures glinting with reflective surfaces, moving in disciplined formation. The Thrax had not expected an attack from the humans. They thought the small human ships were mere curiosities, easily dismissed. "Target acquired," a voice called from the tactical station. "Ready to fire on your command, Chancellor." Mira took a deep breath. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, fire." A blinding flash erupted from the Intrepid as Vaporium energy discharged, illuminating the void. The beam sliced through the Thrax patrol ship with surgical precision, igniting a chain reaction that sent debris scattering into the abyss. The Thrax were thrown into disarray. Their ships, once thought invincible, now lay in tatters, and chaos reigned. The humans pressed forward, emboldened by their initial success, launching wave after wave of Vaporium strikes against the surprised alien forces. Ethan watched in awe as the battle unfolded. The realization that they were indeed powerful began to sink in. With every shot, they reclaimed their narrative from the ashes of doubt. The Thrax had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. Yet amidst the exhilaration of victory, Ethan couldn't shake a gnawing feeling. They had crossed a line, one that could ignite a conflict the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. Would their newfound power come at a cost too great to bear? As the last Thrax ship spiraled into destruction, the remaining fleet of human ships gathered, the triumphant cries of victory echoing through the channels. But amid the cheers, Ethan remained vigilant, knowing that while they had vaporized one part of the Thrax Empire, a larger battle was yet to come. The Thrax would not simply accept defeat. They would retaliate, and when they did, humanity would need more than just Vaporium technology to survive. It would need to unite fully, to rally every resource, every intellect, every drop of courage. As they returned to the stars, a new narrative began to unfold, one where humanity was no longer the underdog, but a formidable force. But with power came responsibility, and the weight of an empire rested heavily on their shoulders. The battle for survival had only just begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Thrax were watching, plotting their revenge, and the ember of conflict that had sparked would soon ignite into a raging firestorm. The aftermath of the first strike was electric. As the Hughes Intrepid and the remaining fleet returned to the orbit of Earth, they were met with a triumphant welcome. Thousands of citizens filled the streets below, their faces illuminated by the glow of holographic displays broadcasting the victory. Humanity had struck a blow against the Thrax Empire, and for the first time they felt a surge of unity, a shared sense of purpose that transcended borders and ideologies. But for Ethan Marlowe, the celebration felt hollow. He stood on the observation deck of the Intrepid, watching as the Earth spun below him, a blue marble swathed in clouds. The cheers echoed through the ship, yet his mind was lost in thought. They had won a battle, yes, but the war was far from over. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Thrax would retaliate, and when they did, it would be more devastating than anyone could anticipate. "Earth is buzzing, isn't it?" Mira Albright's voice cut through his thoughts. She stepped beside him, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "We've shown them we're not to be underestimated." Ethan turned to her, his brow furrowed. "And that's exactly why they'll come for us harder. We've opened a door they thought was sealed." She sighed, looking out at the stars. "You're right. We need to prepare for their response. This victory has drawn their attention, and now they'll see us as a threat." In the days following their initial success, The Federation scrambled to assess the Thrax's likely reactions. The Intelligence Division worked tirelessly to decipher Thrax communications, but their encryption methods proved formidable. All they knew was that the Thrax were furious and were gathering forces. During a council meeting, a holographic map of the galaxy glowed in the center of the table, detailing the Thrax Empire's territories and their strategic locations. Mira stood at the head, flanked by her advisors. "We need to determine their next move. If we can predict it, we can be ready." Ethan leaned over the map, his eyes scanning the highlighted areas. "If they're going to retaliate, it will be swift. They'll likely target our manufacturing and research facilities first. It's where our strengths lie." An advisor spoke up. "But if we can fortify those areas and spread our defenses across the colonies, we might withstand their assault." Mira nodded, her gaze sharp. "Then let's move quickly. I want defense stations set up at every key location. We need to make it clear that we're not just an easy target anymore." The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of urgency, and Ethan felt a wave of determination wash over him. They had the technology, the will, and now the drive to defend themselves. But as he prepared for the coming battle, he knew they would need more than just strategy. They needed allies. Across the galaxy, different civilizations had heard of humanity's victory. The news spread like wildfire, and while some were wary, others saw an opportunity to join forces against the Thrax Empire. Mira decided to reach out to those who had resisted Thrax domination, proposing an alliance of sorts. The first meeting took place in a neutral space station orbiting the planet Velix, home to a technologically advanced race known as the Xyler. Their emissary, a sleek being with iridescent skin that shifted colors, greeted Mira and Ethan with cautious curiosity. "Your actions have resonated throughout the galaxy, humans," the Xyler emissary began, their voice melodic yet firm. "But joining forces with you poses risks. The Thrax do not forgive easily." Mira met the emissary's gaze, unwavering. "We understand the stakes, but standing alone against the Thrax will lead to your destruction. Together, we can create a united front." Ethan chimed in. "The Thrax believe they're invincible. They see us as weak. By joining forces, we can show them that their empire is built on the belief of superiority, a belief that is about to be shattered." The emissary considered this, the colors of their skin shifting to a deep blue. "Perhaps there is strength in numbers, but what can your technology offer us? We have resources and capabilities of our own." Mira leaned forward, determination radiating from her. "We have Vaporium technology that can amplify energy shields and weapon systems. Imagine what we could accomplish if we pooled our knowledge and resources. The Thrax may have advanced weaponry, but we can innovate faster than they can adapt." The emissary nodded slowly, weighing their options. "We shall deliberate. Your offer is compelling, but trust must be earned." As they departed the meeting, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. This alliance could be the key to leveling the playing field. They needed more than just technology. They needed the expertise and strengths of various civilizations to counter the Thrax's might. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the galaxy grew palpable. The Federation fortified its defenses, working tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable retaliation. But as the days passed, a sense of unease settled over the ranks. Was the Thrax Empire planning something more insidious than an all-out attack? Ethan stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, deep in thought, when a blaring alarm shattered the silence. "Incoming transmission," shouted the communications officer, eyes wide with alarm. The screen flickered to life, revealing a Thrax envoy, a crystalline figure radiating authority and anger. "Humans, you have awakened a force beyond your comprehension. Your victory was a fluke, and you will pay dearly for your insolence." Mira stepped forward, her voice steady. "We will not be intimidated. If you come for us, we will fight back with everything we have." The Thrax envoy's laughter echoed through the chamber, chilling Ethan to the core. "You misunderstand the situation. We are not coming for you. We are already here." Before they could react, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared as the crew scrambled to their stations. Ethan's heart raced as he grasped the situation. They've infiltrated our perimeter. They're using stealth technology. The bridge erupted into chaos as the crew worked to assess the damage. Shields are down to 50%. We're being boarded, someone shouted. Prepare for combat, Mira barked. Ethan, get to the weapon systems and redirect power to the front lines. With adrenaline coursing through him, Ethan raced to the weapons control room, his mind racing. The Thrax were upon them, and their arrogance had led them to believe they could take humanity by surprise. He activated the ship's defense systems, readying the Vaporium weaponry for immediate deployment. As the Thrax boarded, their towering crystalline forms burst into the control room, and chaos erupted. Ethan fired the Vaporium beam, the energy slicing through the air, taking out the first wave of attackers. But more followed, their limbs shifting into deadly formations, their crystalline bodies reflecting the dim lights of the ship. Push them back, Mira's voice rang out through the comms, rallying the crew as they fought to defend their ship. Ethan's heart raced as he maneuvered through the chaos, firing at the advancing Thrax, but the crystalline warriors were relentless. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ship, throwing Ethan to the ground. The lights flickered, and alarms blared louder. He scrambled to regain his footing, spotting Mira across the room, grappling with a Thrax warrior. Without hesitation, he rushed to her side, firing another blast that struck the alien in its core, causing it to shatter into a cascade of glowing fragments. "Thank you," Mira shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. "We need to regroup." As they fought their way through the chaos, Ethan realized that they were outnumbered. The Thrax had launched a coordinated assault, and their forces were spilling onto the Intrepid like a tide. The realization hit him hard. They had underestimated the Thrax's resolve. "Fall back to the bridge," Mira commanded, and the remaining crew members rallied behind her. Ethan followed, his heart pounding as they fought their way through the narrow corridors, blasting any Thrax that dared to approach. Once they reached the bridge, Mira quickly assessed the situation. "We need to lock down the ship and seal off any entry points," she ordered. "Prepare the emergency protocols." As the crew scrambled to comply, Ethan caught his breath, scanning the screens. Outside the Intrepid, chaos erupted in space. Thrax ships engaged with the human fleet, and the brilliance of Vaporium beams lit up the dark expanse. "We can't hold them off forever," Ethan exclaimed, his voice tinged with desperation. "We need to call for reinforcements." Mira nodded. "Initiate a distress signal. We need every available ship in the area." As Ethan activated the signal, a chilling realization washed over him. The Thrax had come prepared, and this battle was only the beginning. The Federation had struck a match, and now the galaxy was ablaze. In the depths of space, the Xylar and other potential allies watched the unfolding conflict. The message of humanity's plight resonated with those who had suffered under the Thrax's tyranny. For too long, they had remained silent, fearing the wrath of the Empire. But now, they were compelled to act. The Xylar emissaries stood with their council, a sense of determination in the air. "We cannot sit idly by while humanity fights for its survival. We must join forces now." One council member spoke up, "But their methods are reckless." The council chamber of the Xylar was filled with an electric tension as the emissaries' words hung in the air. The iridescent beings exchanged glances, each weighing the risks and rewards of engaging with the humans. "Reckless or not, they are fighting against an oppressor that has long dominated our sectors," the emissary continued, their color shifting to a vibrant green, signifying urgency. "If we do not act, we will find ourselves next on the Thrax's list." "Have we forgotten the last time we attempted to engage the Thrax directly?" an elder council member challenged, their tone cautious. "Their forces decimated our fleets and left us weakened. What can we gain from an alliance with a species that is so newly awakened?" Another member interjected, "But they have something we do not: innovation. Their Vaporium technology could change the tide of battle. If we support them, we may find a path to liberation for all our people." The chamber fell silent, and the emissary took a deep breath. It is true that we risk much by engaging, but to remain passive is to accept subjugation. I propose we send a contingent of our best fighters and technological experts to support the humans." One elder finally nodded. "Very well, we shall assist them, but we will proceed with caution. We must have an escape plan should things go awry." Back aboard the U's Intrepid, chaos reigned. The bridge was a cacophony of alarms, the crew scrambling to maintain control against the relentless Thrax onslaught. Ethan worked feverishly at his station, redirecting power to shield generators while fending off the attackers. "Reinforcements are on the way," Mira shouted over the din. "But we have to hold them off until they arrive." "Easier said than done," Ethan replied, his voice strained as he fired another blast from the Vaporium weaponry. "We're outnumbered." Just then, the main viewport displayed a new arrival. A fleet of Xyler ships glided into view, their sleek, elongated forms shimmering with energy shields. The sight filled Ethan with a flicker of hope, even amidst the chaos. "They're here," he shouted, excitement lacing his voice. "Get ready, everyone. We may have a fighting chance." As the Xyler ships engaged, unleashing beams of coordinated energy, the tide began to shift. The Thrax, momentarily distracted, began to falter. Ethan watched in awe as the Xyler fighters executed precision maneuvers, weaving through enemy fire and targeting critical systems on the Thrax vessels. "Push forward," Mira commanded. "We need to take back control of the ship." Ethan and his fellow crew members fought with renewed vigor, their spirits lifted by the arrival of allies. The Thrax warriors began to retreat, disoriented by the unexpected strength of their foes. "Focus on the main deck," Ethan yelled, leading a charge against a group of Thrax attempting to breach the bridge. He fired, the Vaporium beam striking true and sending one of the alien attackers crashing against the wall. The fight was fierce, but together they managed to push the Thrax back, reclaiming critical sections of the ship. As they sealed off entrances and activated defensive protocols, a sense of camaraderie began to form among the humans and their Xyler allies. "Cover me," Mira shouted as she rushed to the command console. "I'm rerouting power to the main weapons." Ethan and the Xyler fighters provided cover fire, ensuring no Thrax could reach her as she worked. The energy in the room shifted from desperation to determination, a unified front emerging in the face of adversity. "Main weapons are coming online," Mira announced, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "Prepare to unleash hell." With a deafening roar, the ship's weapons fired in a synchronized assault, Vaporium beams cutting through the remaining Thrax forces like a hot knife through butter. The space around them erupted into chaos, debris flying in every direction. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline, his heart pounding in time with the ship's thrumming engines. They were fighting back, and the tide was turning. After what felt like an eternity, the last of the Thrax invaders was repelled, their crystalline bodies shattered across the bridge and hull of the Intrepid. Ethan and Mira surveyed the damage, the remnants of the battle leaving a stark reminder of the cost they had endured. "Status report," Mira barked, gathering her crew around her. "We've sustained significant damage, but our core systems are intact," Ethan replied, breathless. "The Xyler ships have taken some hits too, but their shields held strong." The Xyler emissary, who had fought valiantly alongside them, approached. "We were fortunate to arrive in time. Your bravery has turned the tide of this battle." Mira nodded, gratitude evident in her eyes. "We couldn't have done it without your help. You fought fiercely, and we're grateful for the alliance." The emissary's colors shifted to a radiant gold, indicating their approval. "This alliance may prove pivotal in the coming war. The Thrax will not forget this day, and they will retaliate with greater force." Ethan interjected. "Then we need to prepare. This battle may have ended in victory, but the war is far from over. We should use this momentum to rally more allies. If we can show others that we can stand against the Thrax, we might gain the support we need." Mira turned to the emissary. "Can we count on the Xyler to help us spread the word? Your reputation precedes you, If you can convince other civilizations to join us, we may form a coalition strong enough to challenge the Thrax." The emissary considered this, their color shifting to a deep purple, indicating contemplation. "We will call upon our contacts and reach out to those who have suffered under Thrax rule. If we can gather enough support, we may indeed stand a chance." In the following weeks, the coalition formed quickly. The Xylar spread the news of humanity's victory, and one by one, other civilizations began to answer the call. The Trillians, a race known for their advanced technology and strategic minds, pledged their support. The Kalthari, a fierce warrior race, brought their combat expertise and ships to the fight. Ethan found himself at the forefront of meetings and briefings, where leaders from various species gathered to discuss strategy and tactics. The sense of unity was palpable, and for the first time, Ethan felt the weight of something greater than himself, a coalition that could stand against the might of the Thrax Empire. In one such meeting, as the leaders gathered around a holographic table displaying maps of the Thrax territories, Mira addressed the group. "Our victories have proven that we are a force to be reckoned with, but we must also be strategic. We cannot afford to underestimate our enemy." A Trillian representative, a tall figure with shimmering skin and piercing eyes, leaned forward. "We propose a two-pronged strategy. Hit them where it hurts most: supply lines and communication hubs. If we disrupt their ability to coordinate, we can gain the upper hand." The Kalthari leader nodded in agreement. "And we must strike swiftly. The Thrax will be reeling from our previous encounter, but they will soon regroup. We need to act before they regain their footing." Ethan chimed in. "I suggest we use our Vaporium technology to enhance our ship's weaponry and shields. If we can deliver a concentrated strike on their supply routes, we might cripple their ability to wage war." Mira surveyed the room, sensing the energy building. "Then it's settled. We'll coordinate a series of strikes targeting key Thrax installations. We will show them that humanity and our allies are no longer their playthings." As the coalition prepared for their first major offensive, Ethan spent countless hours in the lab, working with the scientists from the Xylar and Trillians to refine the Vaporium technology. Together, they developed new weaponry that could amplify their attacks, hoping to turn the tide of the war once and for all. One evening, while testing a prototype weapon, Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration. The device emitted a low hum, pulsating with energy. He stepped back, admiring the intricacies of the new technology. "Impressive work," Mira said as she entered the lab, her gaze fixed on the weapon. "We need this kind of innovation in the field. We can't afford any setbacks." Ethan nodded, a mix of pride and anxiety coursing through him. "This weapon could change everything, but we need to deploy it correctly. If we misfire, we could lose our edge." "Then let's ensure it's ready for action," she replied. "We have a mission to prepare for, and every second counts." The coalition's plan took shape, a daring infiltration targeting a key Thrax supply depot located on a barren moon near their capital. The depot was vital for resupplying their fleets, and taking it out could severely hinder their operations. The day of the operation arrived. A fleet of coalition ships, including the Intrepid, assembled in formation, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. As Ethan stood on the bridge, he felt a surge of camaraderie with his fellow crew members and allies. This was it, the moment they had worked toward for so long. "Remember," Mira said, addressing the crew, "our goal is to strike hard and fast. We hit the supply depot, disrupt their logistics, and then withdraw before they can." The shrill alarms blared through the corridors of the Thrax supply depot, drowning out the frantic whispers of Ethan's team. As he stared at the loading bar inching toward completion, the thud of heavy footsteps reverberated ominously closer. Come on," Ethan urged, his fingers flying over the controls. Sweat trickled down his brow as the door trembled under the weight of advancing soldiers. He could see the flickering red lights reflecting off the faces of his team, their expressions a mix of determination and dread. The download finally completed with a triumphant beep, and Ethan yanked the data chip from the terminal. "Got it," he shouted, shoving it into his pocket. "Now let's get out of here." As they turned to exit, the door burst open, and a group of Thrax soldiers stormed in, their crystalline forms shimmering menacingly. Ethan's heart raced. There was no time for hesitation. "Fall back," he shouted, leading his team toward the nearest exit. The Thrax soldiers advanced with lethal precision, their weapons charged and ready to fire. "Cover us," he commanded, as they opened fire on the soldiers. The air filled with the sounds of energy blasts and the unmistakable crackle of Vaporium weaponry. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline as he grabbed a weapon from one of the fallen Thrax and returned fire. The fight was chaotic. Ethan ducked and weaved between blasts, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see his team holding their ground, but the Thrax were relentless, advancing with an eerie efficiency. "Get to the transport shuttle," Ethan yelled, leading the charge. "We can't let them corner us." As they pushed through the depot's hallways, the team moved in formation, firing back at the Thrax while avoiding incoming fire. The narrow corridors were filled with chaos, but they fought with a fierce determination, driven by the knowledge that failure could mean the end of their efforts against the Thrax Empire. They finally reached the docking bay, where their transport shuttle awaited. "Get in, I'll cover you," Ethan shouted, firing at the Thrax soldiers still pursuing them. One by one, his team clambered aboard the shuttle, and Ethan was about to follow when he noticed a squad of Thrax soldiers moving in from the opposite side. "Ethan, hurry!" one of his teammates yelled. With a final burst of energy, Ethan sprinted toward the shuttle just as a blast grazed his shoulder, sending him tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to let it slow him down. "Now!" he shouted, scrambling into the shuttle just as the ramp began to close. He could feel the rush of air as the Thrax soldiers reached the entrance, their angry shouts echoing in his ears. "Engage engines!" he commanded as he pulled himself into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, and the shuttle lifted off just as the ramp sealed. "Go! Go!" Mira shouted from the back, the urgency in her voice compelling Ethan to push the throttle forward. With a jolt, they shot out of the docking bay and into the void of space. The stars blinked in and out of view as they broke free of the Thrax moon's atmosphere. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, but he knew they weren't safe yet. As they escaped, Ethan quickly plotted a course back to the Intrepid. However, their troubles were far from over. A squadron of Thrax fighters emerged from the moon, hot on their tail, their engines flaring as they pursued the shuttle. "Brace yourselves," Ethan yelled, flipping switches to activate the shuttle's defensive systems. The atmosphere inside the cockpit was tense, every heartbeat echoing the urgency of their situation. The Thrax fighters opened fire, energy beams streaking toward them. Ethan maneuvered the shuttle through the stars, dodging and weaving as he tried to shake off the attackers. The shuttle rocked violently as a shot grazed the side, alarms blaring in response. "Hold on," Ethan shouted, his hands gripping the controls as he pushed the shuttle to its limits. "We need to get back to the fleet." He could see the Intrepid in the distance, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. "Just a little further," he urged, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Ethan, they're gaining on us," Mira warned, her eyes wide with concern as she scanned the rear sensors. "We need to fight back." With a swift decision, Ethan activated the shuttle's weapon systems. "Fine, let's give them a taste of their own medicine." He targeted the lead fighter and fired, watching as the beam struck true, exploding the enemy ship in a fiery burst. Cheers erupted from the back of the shuttle, but Ethan didn't let up. "Focus, we still have more on our tail." As they neared the Intrepid, the ship's defense systems sprang to life, engaging the pursuing Thrax fighters. The Coalition fleet had arrived, and the space around them was a battlefield of energy beams and explosions. "Intrepid, this is Shuttle Alpha 1, we're coming in hot." Ethan shouted into the comms as he maneuvered the shuttle toward the hangar bay. "Copy that, Alpha 1. Prepare for landing," came the response, and he could see the hangar doors opening, a welcoming sight amidst the chaos. "Hang on," Ethan shouted as he dove into the hangar, the shuttle landing hard but safe. The moment the ramp lowered, they rushed out, weapons at the ready. "Report," Mira commanded as they emerged, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Ethan took a moment to catch his breath. "We got the data. We need to upload it to Command ASAP." They rushed through the ship, heading toward the central command room. As they ran, they could hear the sounds of battle outside, the clash of their allies against the Thrax forces echoing through the corridors. Once they reached the command room, Ethan quickly uploaded the data chip to the mainframe. "This data could give us crucial insight into their supply lines and vulnerabilities," he explained, urgency in his voice. Mira stood beside him, her expression determined. "We need to analyze this information and develop our next strategy. This fight isn't over." As the data began to process, Ethan turned to the crew assembled in the command room, their faces tense and expectant. "We've fought hard to get this information. Now it's time to use it." The processing completed, and the screens flickered to life, revealing detailed maps of the Thrax supply routes, alongside potential weaknesses in their infrastructure. "Look at this," Ethan pointed to a series of highlighted lines. "These routes are heavily trafficked but poorly defended in these sectors. If we can hit them here, we can disrupt their operations significantly." Mira studied the data closely. "This is good. We can coordinate strikes across multiple locations simultaneously. If we divide their forces, we can hit them where it hurts." Suddenly, the doors burst open, and a frantic officer rushed in. "Commander, we've lost contact with several ships in the fleet. The Thrax are mounting a counteroffensive." "Damn it," Mira swore, her eyes narrowing. "We can't afford to lose our ships now. We need to regroup and defend our position." Ethan's mind raced. What if we used the data we just obtained? We could set up traps along their approach routes, use their own momentum against them. Mira nodded, her expression hardening. "We can't let them regroup. If we can slow their advance, we can buy time for our allies to reinforce." They quickly laid out a plan, deploying ships strategically along the Thrax routes, setting traps and ambushes to catch the enemy off guard. The crew sprang into action, coordinating with the coalition forces to prepare for the inevitable clash. The Thrax counteroffensive came sooner than expected. As coalition ships scrambled to take their positions, the ominous shadows of the Thrax fleet emerged from the darkness of space, a formidable array of vessels intent on reclaiming their dominance. "Battle stations," Mira commanded, her voice steady even in the face of overwhelming odds. "We will stand our ground." Ethan felt a surge of determination as he took his place at the weapons console. The main viewport was filled with the sight of incoming Thrax ships, their sleek forms ominous against the backdrop of stars. "Remember the plan," he shouted to the crew. "Stay focused, and we'll take them down one by one." The ships exchanged fire as the battle erupted around them. Energy beams streaked through space, illuminating the darkness. Ethan's hands moved with precision, targeting the approaching Thrax vessels. As they engaged, the coalition's ambush sprang into action. Ships hidden in the asteroid field unleashed a torrent of fire, catching the Thrax by surprise. Explosions lit up the void, sending debris spiraling through space. "Keep up the pressure," Mira shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "We can't let them regroup." Ethan fired another round, his heart racing as he watched a Thrax ship go down in flames. "They're beginning to falter," he yelled, hope flooding through him. "We can do this." But just as victory seemed within reach, a massive Thrax battleship emerged from the shadows, dwarfing the coalition vessels. It unleashed a barrage of fire, targeting the Intrepid directly. "Evasive maneuvers," Mira shouted. Ethan's heart pounded as the massive Thrax battleship loomed in front of them, its weapon systems glowing ominously. He gripped the controls, his instincts kicking in as he maneuvered the Intrepid with every ounce of skill he could muster. "Evasive maneuvers," Mira shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Get us out of their line of fire." Ethan twisted the ship, banking sharply to the left as energy blasts shot past them, narrowly missing the hull. The ship trembled under the force of near misses, and alarms blared in the background. He could see the crew working feverishly, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. "Target their weapon systems," Mira ordered, her eyes fixed on the battleship. "If we can disable them, we stand a chance." Ethan nodded, his fingers dancing over the targeting controls. He locked onto one of the ship's massive cannons, exhaling slowly to steady his aim. Firing now. The beam shot forward, striking the cannon with a brilliant flash. For a moment, the weapon sputtered, then exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Ethan's victory was short-lived. "Reinforcements are coming in," one of the officers shouted, pointing at the viewport. A second wave of Thrax ships appeared from behind the battleship, their formations tight and disciplined. The sight sent a chill down Ethan's spine. They were outnumbered. "Prepare for impact," Mira yelled as the Intrepid shuddered under the enemy fire. Ethan fought to maintain control, but the ship was taking damage. He glanced at the damage reports flashing on his screen, and his stomach dropped. They were losing shields rapidly, and the hull integrity was compromised. "Can you hold them off?" Mira asked, her voice steady even as the ship rocked. Ethan focused on the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'll do my best, but we need to pull back and regroup with the rest of the fleet. We can't take them all on at once." "Agreed," Mira replied, her expression grim. "Divert power to the engines. We need to make a strategic retreat." Ethan rerouted power, the ship's engines roaring to life. "I'm setting a course for the asteroid field. We can use the debris to shield our retreat." The Intrepid veered sharply, entering the rocky expanse of the asteroid field. Ethan could feel the tension in the air as they navigated through the chaos. Small rocks and larger asteroids drifted through space, a treacherous obstacle that could either save them or be their doom. "Hold steady," Mira said, her gaze fixed on the sensors. "We need to use the asteroids to block their line of fire. Let's make it difficult for them to track us." As they weaved through the field, Ethan felt a sense of determination rising within him. They had faced overwhelming odds before, and they could do it again. With every twist and turn, he felt the weight of their mission, the survival of not just humanity, but of their allies too. "Thrax ships are pursuing," an officer called out. "They're adjusting their fire." Ethan's heart raced as he maneuvered through the maze of rocks. He could see the Thrax vessels approaching, their weapons primed. "We need to split them up," he muttered under his breath, scanning the field for a strategy. "Look," Mira pointed. "That larger asteroid cluster, if we can lead them into it, we might create some chaos in their ranks." Ethan nodded, adrenaline surging. "Let's do it." He punched the throttle forward, aiming for the cluster. The Intrepid shot forward, and Ethan could feel the thrill of the chase, the sheer exhilaration of outsmarting their pursuers. The Thrax ships followed closely, eager to close the distance. As they entered the cluster, Ethan pushed the engines to their limits, navigating through the rocks with precision. The Thrax ships were less nimble, and as they tried to follow, they collided with the larger asteroids, creating a series of explosions that lit up the darkness. "Keep it up!" Mira shouted, her voice filled with energy. "We're breaking their formation." Ethan felt a surge of hope as he glanced at the tactical display. "We're doing it, but we need to keep moving. They'll regroup if we don't stay ahead." With renewed determination, Ethan steered the ship deeper into the asteroid field. The explosions from behind served as a reminder of the chaos they had unleashed. For a moment, it felt as if they had a chance, a fleeting glimmer of victory against their formidable enemy. "New contacts," another officer called. "Reinforcements from the coalition are entering the field." Ethan's heart leaped. "That's our backup. If we can hold the line just a little longer, we might turn the tide." Mira nodded. "We need to make sure they know where to find us. We should set up a beacon to signal our location." "On it," Ethan replied, activating the beacon systems. "This will alert our allies to our position and help them navigate the field safely." The ship jolted as another blast rocked them. and Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. "We can't afford to take any more hits. I'll reroute shields to the aft. We need to protect our rear flank." As he worked, the tactical display illuminated with new readings. The Coalition fleet was moving in, engaging the remaining Thrax ships. The tide of battle was shifting, and the moment felt electric. "Looks like they're distracted," Mira said, a determined smile forming on her lips. "Let's rejoin our forces and make one last push." Ethan nodded, adrenaline flooding his veins. Setting a course back toward the main fleet. "Let's do this." He piloted the Intrepid out of the asteroid field, and the sight of the Coalition ships rallying together filled him with hope. They were not alone. As they rejoined their allies, a sense of purpose surged within him. They would fight together, and they would not back down. The Thrax would learn that they had underestimated their resolve. With the Coalition fleet now engaging the Thrax forces, the battlefield was alive with energy and fire. Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope as he directed the Intrepid into formation with the other ships. "Let's hit them hard," Mira commanded, her voice unwavering. "We know their weaknesses now. This is our chance to turn the tide." Ethan nodded, eyes focused on the display as he targeted the nearest Thrax ship. Locking on, firing! The energy beam shot forth, striking true and causing the Thrax vessel to shudder before it exploded in a brilliant flash. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Ethan kept his focus, aware that they still had a long way to go. "Keep moving! Stay agile!" Mira shouted. "We need to create openings for our allies." As they maneuvered through the fray, Ethan worked tirelessly, coordinating with other ships and providing support fire. The energy of the Coalition was palpable. They fought like a unified force, each vessel complementing the other's strengths. Suddenly, a warning blared from the console. "Incoming missile!" an officer shouted. Ethan's heart raced as he quickly adjusted the ship's trajectory, narrowly avoiding the incoming projectile. "Deploy countermeasures," he yelled, activating the ship's defense systems. The missiles detonated harmlessly in the distance, but the close call served as a reminder of the stakes they were facing. They were fighting for their lives and the future of their coalition. As the battle raged on, Ethan caught sight of the massive Thrax battleship again, its weapons primed and ready. It seemed to be targeting the coalition's flagship, the Astrea. "Mira, we need to focus on that battleship," Ethan shouted, determination fueling his words. "If we can take it down, we can demoralize their forces." Mira's eyes narrowed. "Let's do it. Set a course. We need to flank it and hit those weapon systems." Ethan plotted the course, guiding the Intrepid closer to the monstrous ship. They would need to be quick and strategic if they were going to avoid the barrage of fire aimed in their direction. "Engaging now," he called out, steering the ship to the side of the battleship. Locking on to their weapons systems. "Fire when ready," Mira commanded, her voice a steady beacon of strength. Ethan pulled the trigger, watching as the beam struck one of the battleship's cannons, causing it to shudder violently. Direct hit, their returning fire. The ship rocked as the Thrax battleship retaliated, energy blasts slamming into the shields. "Shields holding at 50%, Ethan reported, gritting his teeth. "Push forward, we can't let up now," Mira shouted, and the determination in her voice urged him on. He targeted another cannon, firing again. The explosion reverberated through the battlefield, and cheers erupted from the crew. But the battleship was far from done. As the Intrepid pressed the attack, the Thrax forces began to falter, their once cohesive formation breaking apart under the Coalition's onslaught. The tides were turning, but Ethan knew they had to finish the fight. The atmosphere in the command center of the Intrepid crackled with tension as Ethan and Mira led the charge against the looming Thrax battleship. The air was thick with the acrid scent of energy discharges, and the sounds of battle echoed through the ship. "Stay focused," Mira urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're almost through. Target their shield generators next." Ethan nodded, hands steady on the controls. He locked on to the glowing shield emitters of the Thrax ship. feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. This was it. This was their chance to shift the balance of power. "Firing," he announced, and a beam shot forth, hitting the shields with a blinding flash. The energy crackled and sputtered, a clear indication that the Thrax defenses were weakening. "Direct hit, their shields are failing," an officer reported, excitement palpable in their voice. "Keep the pressure on," Mira commanded, her eyes sharp. "We need to break through before they can regroup." As the Intrepid maneuvered closer, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He was acutely aware of the stakes. They were not just fighting for their lives, but for the future of countless worlds. The Coalition fleet, emboldened by their initial successes, rallied around the Intrepid. Ships coordinated attacks, firing in unison as they pressed the assault on the battleship. The once formidable Thrax vessel was now surrounded, its defenses crumbling under the relentless onslaught. Ethan took a moment to glance at the tactical display. "We're making progress, but we need to stay vigilant. They could have backup." As if on cue, the sensors blared a warning. "New contacts approaching," an officer shouted. "Thrax reinforcements." Ethan's heart sank. "We need to hold our position and finish the job before they arrive." The atmosphere in the command room shifted as the Coalition officers exchanged worried glances. "Mira, we need to divide our forces," Ethan suggested, a plan forming in his mind. "If we can keep the reinforcements busy while we finish off the battleship, we can significantly weaken their attack." Mira considered this for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. We'll split our fire. The main force will target the battleship, while a secondary team holds off the reinforcements." Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose as they quickly relayed the orders to the fleet. "Let's do this." As the Coalition fleet prepared to execute the plan, Ethan and Mira focused their fire on the Thrax battleship. Energy beams lit up the darkness, striking the ship's hull with explosive force. The massive vessel shook violently, but it wasn't enough to bring it down just yet. "Keep targeting those generators," Mira urged, her eyes scanning the tactical readout. "We need to make sure they can't recover." Ethan locked onto another energy emitter, squeezing the trigger and feeling a rush as the beam tore through the void. The emitter exploded, sending sparks flying into space. "Great shot," Mira cheered. "Now let's finish this." The battleship's remaining shields flickered erratically, and Ethan felt a thrill of hope. They were on the verge of victory, but he couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. "Reinforcements are closing in," an officer shouted. "They'll be on us in moments." Ethan tightened his grip on the controls. "We have to do this now. Fire everything we have." The Intrepid unleashed a barrage of energy beams, and the Coalition ships joined in, a synchronized symphony of destruction aimed at the Thrax battleship. The ship shuddered as the combined firepower struck the battleship's weakened hull. Ethan watched as the outer structure began to buckle, sparks flying as critical systems failed. "Almost there," Mira called out, her eyes alight with determination. "One last push." With a surge of adrenaline, Ethan targeted the battleship's bridge, the heart of its command structure. Locking on this is it. Just as he was about to fire, the sensors blared again. "Incoming missiles," an officer warned. Ethan's stomach dropped as he quickly adjusted the ship's trajectory, narrowly avoiding the barrage aimed at them. "We need to hold steady," he shouted, feeling the ship rock beneath them. Mira's voice rose above the chaos. "Divert power to the aft shields. We need to protect the ship while we finish this." Ethan worked quickly, rerouting energy as he continued to keep the battleship in his sights. "Power diverted. Let's finish this." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. With a final burst of energy, he fired at the battleship's bridge. The beam struck with devastating force, and for a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then came the explosion, a brilliant flash that lit up the void, engulfing the bridge in fire and debris. The Thrax battleship shuddered violently, and alarms blared throughout its systems. "Direct hit," an officer shouted, excitement coursing through the room. The battleship began to break apart, and Ethan felt a swell of triumph. They had done it. They had taken down one of the most formidable ships in the Thrax fleet. Cheers erupted in the command center, and Ethan couldn't help but smile, feeling the exhilaration of victory wash over him. "Keep your eyes open, this isn't over yet," Mira cautioned, her expression serious. Ethan quickly refocused, scanning the tactical display. The remaining Thrax forces were beginning to scatter, but reinforcements continued to close in. "Looks like they're trying to regroup," he noted. "We need to capitalize on this moment." Mira nodded, her expression determined. "Let's keep the pressure on. We can't let them escape." With renewed purpose, the Intrepid and the Coalition fleet pressed the attack, targeting the remaining Thrax vessels. The void was filled with the sights and sounds of battle, energy beams flashing as ships maneuvered to gain the upper hand. Ethan felt the adrenaline coursing through him as they engaged the Thrax ships, each strike bringing them closer to victory. The remnants of the Thrax fleet fought back fiercely, but they were disorganized and demoralized after the loss of their battleship. As the battle raged on, Ethan noticed a shift in the tides. The Thrax ships began to falter, their formations breaking apart as Coalition vessels pressed their advantage. "Keep it up," Mira shouted, urging the crew forward. "We're wearing them down." Ethan focused on the remaining Thrax vessels, targeting one that was struggling to maintain its position. "Firing," he called, sending a beam straight into the heart of the ship. The explosion illuminated the darkness, and Ethan felt a rush of triumph as the enemy ship broke apart. One more down. As they continued the assault, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie with the crew, the unity of purpose pushing them forward. They were not just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for the future of countless worlds. Then, in a moment that felt surreal, the remaining Thrax ships began to retreat, their forces breaking and scattering into the void. "They're falling back," an officer exclaimed, disbelief coloring their voice. "We've done it." Cheers erupted once more, filling the command center with a sense of triumph and relief. The Coalition fleet had fought valiantly, and their combined efforts had turned the tide of the battle. Mira turned to Ethan, a proud smile on her face. "You did it, Ethan. You helped lead us to victory." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, gratitude swelling as he met her gaze. It was a team effort. We all played our part. As the reality of their victory began to sink in, Ethan took a moment to breathe deeply. They had faced insurmountable odds and come out victorious, but he knew the fight was far from over. Once the initial celebrations subsided, the atmosphere shifted as the crew gathered to assess the situation and plan their next steps. "All right, everyone, let's regroup," Mira said, her voice firm. "We've won a significant battle, but we need to strategize for the future. The Thrax will not take this loss lightly." Ethan nodded, ready to contribute. "We need to analyze the data from this engagement. Understanding their tactics and weaknesses could give us an advantage in future confrontations." As the team gathered around the tactical display, Ethan started to review the battle data, noting the patterns and movements of the Thrax ships. "Their formations were tight at first, but once we took out the battleship, they lost cohesion," he observed. "They seemed to rely heavily on their larger ships for command." Mira leaned closer, her expression thoughtful. "If we can disrupt their command structure in future battles, we may be able to dismantle their fleet more easily." Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. "We could also exploit the Thrax's reliance on their supply routes. If we can disrupt their logistics, we could weaken their entire operation." "Agreed," Mira replied. "But we'll need to be careful. The Thrax will likely tighten security and adapt their strategies after this defeat." As the discussion continued, the atmosphere in the command center buzzed with energy and determination. The Coalition had proven its strength, but the road ahead remained fraught with challenges. The victory celebrations on the Intrepid were short-lived as the harsh realities of war set back in. The Coalition had suffered losses, and the remnants of the Thrax fleet were regrouping in the depths of space. Ethan, Mira, and the rest of the crew gathered around the holographic display in the command center, preparing to analyze the aftermath of their recent battle. "Let's focus on what we can learn from this engagement," Mira began, her tone serious. "We've faced the Thrax and survived, but we need to understand their tactics to prepare for the next encounter." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the tactical data streaming across the display. The Thrax relied heavily on their battleship as a command center. Once we took that out, their coordination broke down. "Exactly," Mira replied, her finger tracing a line across the display. "But they still have a significant fleet and the ability to regroup. We need to anticipate their next moves." As the officers around them began discussing strategies, Ethan felt a familiar tension rising in his chest. Memories of past battles, of the friends he had lost, weighed heavily on him. He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts. Now was not the time for doubt. They had to remain focused. After hours of strategy meetings, a plan began to take shape. The coalition would focus on disrupting the Thrax supply lines while also bolstering their defenses. Mira led the discussions, her leadership qualities shining through as she commanded respect from the officers. "We have an opportunity to strike at the heart of their operations," Mira announced, her voice ringing with authority. "By targeting their supply routes, we can weaken them significantly before the next major engagement." Ethan raised his hand. "We should also consider the political implications. If we can sever their connections to key allies, we might be able to create a ripple effect." Mira nodded. "Agreed. It's time to strengthen our alliances and forge new ones. We need to reach out to our contacts in the Outer Rim and gather intel on the Thrax's operations." As the meeting concluded, Ethan stepped outside the command center, the weight of their plan settling on his shoulders. He needed to prepare himself mentally for what lay ahead, but the ghost of his past loomed large. Ethan made his way to the observation deck, seeking solace in the vastness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, each one a reminder of the worlds that depended on their fight against the Thrax. He leaned against the cold metal railing, his thoughts drifting back to his time before the war, before he had become the pilot fighting for survival. His mind wandered to his sister, Elena. She had been his anchor, the one who believed in him even when he doubted himself. The memories of their childhood flooded back, racing through the fields of their home planet, laughter echoing in the air. But the war had taken everything from him, and he hadn't heard from her since the conflict began. "Ethan," Mira's voice pulled him from his reverie. He turned to see her approaching, her expression softening as she joined him at the railing. "You okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Just thinking," he replied, trying to mask the vulnerability that threatened to surface. "About what we've lost, and what's still at stake." Mira nodded, her gaze focused on the stars. "We've all lost something in this fight, but we're not alone. We're in this together." Her words were a balm, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope reigniting within him. "You're right. We have a chance to make a difference. We can't give up." Mira turned to him, her expression serious. "We need to be prepared for the next battle. The Thrax won't back down easily." "I know," Ethan said, his determination hardening. "I'll make sure we're ready." The following days were a whirlwind of activity as the coalition prepared for the next phase of their campaign. Ethan and Mira worked tirelessly to reach out to potential allies in the Outer Rim, sending messages and coordinating meetings. One evening, as they finalized their plans, an officer burst into the command center. "Captain, we've received a response from an Outer Rim faction, the Zelker Syndicate." Ethan exchanged a glance with Mira, a mix of excitement and apprehension on their faces. The Zelker Syndicate was known for their dubious dealings and unpredictable nature, but they also had resources and connections that could prove invaluable. "Put them through," Mira ordered, her voice steady. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows. A low, gravelly voice emanated from the speaker. "You've made quite a name for yourselves, Intrepid. I hear you've been causing trouble for the Thrax." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "We're trying to end this war. We need your help." The figure leaned forward, a smirk evident in the dim light. Help, you say? What's in it for us? The Zelker Syndicate doesn't work for free. Mira stepped forward, her tone firm. We can offer you a share of the spoils when we defeat the Thrax. You'll have access to the resources we seize. The figure chuckled darkly. And how do I know you can deliver? The Thrax are not to be underestimated. Ethan took a breath, steeling himself. Because we're winning. We just took down one of their battleships, and we're poised to disrupt their supply lines. Join us, and you'll be on the winning side. The figure considered this, his eyes glinting with interest. Very well. I'll send a small contingent of ships to assist you. But remember, the Syndicate does not tolerate betrayal. Mira nodded, maintaining her composure. We understand. Thank you for your support. As the transmission ended, Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. That went better than expected. Maybe, Mira replied, her expression thoughtful. But we need to keep a close eye on them. They play a dangerous game. With the Zelker Syndicate's assistance secured, the Coalition began making final preparations for their next mission. Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose as they plotted their course through the Outer Rim, targeting Thrax supply routes that had been identified through intel gathered from their new allies. In the days leading up to the operation, Ethan and Mira worked closely together, their bond strengthening as they shared ideas and strategies. They spent long nights poring over data, refining their plans, and preparing the crew for what lay ahead. Are you ready for this? Mira asked one evening as they reviewed their strategy in the command center. Ethan paused, considering her question. As ready as we can be. We've trained for this. We know what to expect. Mira nodded, her expression serious. Just remember, things can change in an instant. Stay adaptable. I will, Ethan assured her, determination coursing through him. We're going to make a difference. The day of the operation arrived, and the atmosphere aboard the Intrepid was electric with anticipation. The crew moved with purpose, preparing the ship for the journey into enemy territory. As they set out, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They were venturing into dangerous territory, and the stakes had never been higher. Set course for the Thrax supply route, Mira commanded, her voice firm. We'll rendezvous with the Zelker Syndicate ships at the edge of the sector. As they traveled through the void, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. They were about to strike a significant blow against the Thrax, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at him. After a tense journey, they finally reached the rendezvous point. The Zelker ships emerged from the shadows, sleek and menacing in their design. Ethan felt a mix of apprehension and excitement as they prepared for the operation. Let's make sure we're coordinated, Mira instructed. We can't afford any missteps. The Coalition and Zelker ships formed up, their formations tightening as they approached the Thrax supply route. Ethan's heart raced as they drew closer to their target, the vastness of space swallowing them whole. As they neared the supply route, the sensors suddenly blared a warning. Multiple Thrax ships detected. They're already here. Ethan's stomach dropped as he quickly assessed the situation. They must have gotten wind of our plan. We're outnumbered. Mira's expression hardened. We need to hold our ground. Divert power to shields and prepare for engagement. As the Thrax vessels came into view, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. They were larger and more numerous than he had anticipated, but retreat was not an option. Engage, Mira shouted, and the Intrepid fired upon the nearest Thrax ship. The battle erupted in a symphony of explosions and energy beams, the chaos enveloping them as both sides clashed. Ethan maneuvered the ship with precision, dodging incoming fire while returning shots at the enemy. Focus on their command ships, Mira called out. We need to disrupt their coordination. Ethan locked onto one of the command vessels, feeling the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. He fired, the beam striking true and causing the ship to shudder. The battle intensified around the Intrepid, chaos and destruction swirling in the void as the Coalition forces clashed with the Thrax fleet. Energy beams crisscrossed through the darkness, illuminating the grim determination etched on the faces of the crew. Ethan's hands moved deftly over the controls, his instincts kicking in as he maneuvered the ship to evade a barrage of incoming fire. "Ethan, we need to take out those command ships," Mira shouted, her voice rising above the din of battle. "They're coordinating the Thrax response. Without them, we can disrupt their formations." "On it," Ethan replied, his heart racing as he targeted the nearest command ship. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, every second stretching into eternity as he lined up his shot. Just as he was about to fire, the Intrepid shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the ship took a hit, sending a shock wave through the control panel. "Shields down to 60%, an officer shouted, panic lacing their voice. "Divert power to forward shields," Mira ordered, her focus unwavering. "We can't let them flank us." Ethan adjusted the ship's energy distribution, feeling the weight of their predicament. They were outnumbered, and the Thrax ships seemed relentless in their pursuit. With renewed determination, Ethan locked onto the command ship again. "Firing," he called out, releasing a concentrated burst of energy. The beam struck true, and the command ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, fragments scattering into the void. "Direct hit, one down," Mira cheered, but her triumph was short-lived. "Look out, more ships incoming from starboard." Ethan barely had time to react as another wave of Thrax vessels descended upon them, their weapons primed and ready. "We're surrounded," he shouted, adrenaline flooding his system. "Focus fire on the lead ship," Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "If we can take out their formation leader, we might cause confusion among the rest." Ethan obeyed, targeting the lead ship with fierce determination. The Intrepid's cannons roared as he fired again, watching as the energy beam struck the ship's hull. It shuddered, and for a moment he thought it might break apart. But just then, another Thrax ship opened fire, and Ethan barely managed to pull the Intrepid out of harm's way. "We can't keep this up forever," he yelled, frustration creeping into his voice. "Then we need to make our move now," Mira said, her eyes fierce with determination. "We have to break through their lines and make a run for their supply depot." Ethan's heart raced at the thought. It was a risky maneuver, but they had little choice. "Okay, let's do it." With a series of deft maneuvers, Ethan piloted the Intrepid toward the heart of the Thrax formation. The ship rocked as enemy fire pounded against their shields, but Mira remained steadfast, issuing commands and coordinating their attack. "Cover me," she shouted, her focus unyielding as she prepared to launch a torpedo at the nearest supply ship. "Engaging," Ethan responded, his fingers dancing across the controls as he fired at the approaching ships, creating a brief opening for Mira. The torpedo shot forth, striking the supply ship and causing a massive explosion that sent debris scattering in every direction. "Nice shot," Ethan yelled, exhilarated by the impact. "Now's our chance, let's push through," Mira said, and with a final burst of speed, the Intrepid surged ahead, breaking through the Thrax lines. Ethan's heart raced as they burst into the relative calm beyond the enemy formation. For a brief moment, it felt like they had escaped, but the relief was short-lived. "We're not out of the woods yet," he warned, scanning the sensors for incoming threats. "Regroup with the Zelker ships," Mira ordered. "We need to secure our position and prepare for the next assault." As they linked up with the Zelker Syndicate vessels, Ethan quickly assessed their situation. The Coalition fleet had suffered damage, but morale remained high. They had taken down several enemy ships and disrupted the Thrax's command structure. The crew worked quickly to assess their status, and the atmosphere in the command center shifted from desperation to determination. Officers moved with purpose, relaying information and gathering data on the battle. "Status report," Mira called, her voice cutting through the bustle. "We've sustained some damage to our shields, but the hull is intact," an officer reported. "We're at 75% operational capacity." "Good. We'll need every bit of that for the next phase," Mira replied. "Ethan, I want you to analyze the data from the supply depot. We need to know what the Thrax have been transporting." Ethan nodded, diving into the tactical displays as he began to sift through the incoming data. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in his mind. The Thrax would retaliate. It was only a matter of time. After a few moments, a commotion erupted on the bridge as one of the officers shouted, "Incoming Thrax ships! They're coming for us!" "Battle stations," Mira commanded, her voice steady. "Ethan, we need to get ready to defend our position." As Ethan prepared for the oncoming assault, he felt the tension in the air grow thick. They had gained some ground, but the Thrax were not going to let this defeat slide easily. The Thrax vessels emerged from the darkness, sleek and menacing as they bore down on the Coalition fleet. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he locked onto the nearest enemy ship, his instincts kicking in. "Engaging," he shouted, firing the Intrepid's cannons as energy beams lit up the darkness. The Coalition ships joined in, a symphony of destruction erupting as they fought back against the onslaught. Mira's commands rang out, directing their fire and focusing their efforts on the lead Thrax ship. "Target their engines," she instructed. "If we can disable them, we can slow their advance." Ethan aimed carefully, squeezing the trigger as he fired at the enemy engines. The beam struck true, and he watched as the Thrax ship shuddered, losing power and drifting off course. "Good job. Keep it up," Mira encouraged, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the battlefield. But even as they fought, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Thrax were more organized than ever. They were adapting quickly, and their tactics were becoming increasingly aggressive. "Reinforcements are coming in from the starboard side," an officer shouted. Ethan turned to see a new wave of Thrax vessels entering the fray, flanking the Coalition ships and cutting off their retreat. "We're being surrounded," he shouted, his heart pounding. "Focus fire. We can't let them close in," Mira called, her voice steady amid the chaos. Ethan fought against the rising tide of panic as he maneuvered the Intrepid, firing at the approaching ships. He felt the ship rock under the onslaught, and alarms blared as their shields began to falter again. "Shields down to 30%, an officer reported, anxiety creeping into their voice. Mira's expression hardened. "We need to regroup. Get the Zelker ships to cover our flanks." Ethan's heart raced as he realized how dire the situation had become. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the Thrax seemed relentless in their pursuit. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Mira ordered, and Ethan quickly adjusted the Intrepid's trajectory, weaving through the debris and enemy fire. Just as they seemed to be gaining some ground, another Thrax ship emerged from the shadows, its weapons primed and ready. "Incoming missiles!" an officer shouted, panic rising. "Evasive actions," Mira commanded, and Ethan pulled the ship into a steep dive, narrowly avoiding the oncoming barrage. The Intrepid shuddered as a missile grazed their shields, sending sparks flying across the control panel. "Keep it steady," Ethan yelled, adrenaline surging through him as he focused on the controls. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the lives of his crew hanging in the balance. "Target their command ship," Mira shouted, determination etched on her face. "We need to disrupt their coordination." Ethan locked onto the command ship, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. "Firing," he called, unleashing a powerful energy beam that struck the command ship's hull. The impact sent shockwaves through the area, and Ethan watched as the command ship faltered, its coordination breaking down. "Direct hit. They're losing their grip," he shouted. But just as they began to feel a glimmer of hope, the remaining Thrax vessels intensified their assault, pouring fire onto the Coalition ships. "Hold the line," Mira commanded, her voice resolute as she directed the crew. "We can't let them overwhelm us." Ethan's heart raced as he pushed the Intrepid to its limits, weaving between enemy fire and returning shots with deadly precision. He could feel the tension in the air, the stakes rising higher with each passing moment. "Shields down to 10%, an officer shouted, their voice trembling. "Divert all remaining power to the shields," Mira ordered. "We need to hold on." The battle intensified around the Intrepid, chaos and destruction swirling in the void as the coalition forces clashed with the Thrax fleet. Energy beams crisscrossed through the darkness, illuminating the grim determination etched on the faces of the crew. Ethan's hands moved deftly over the controls, his instincts kicking in as he maneuvered the ship to evade a barrage of incoming fire. "Ethan, we need to take out those command ships," Mira shouted, her voice rising above the din of battle. "They're coordinating the Thrax response. Without them, we can disrupt their formations." "On it," Ethan replied, his heart racing as he targeted the nearest command ship. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, every second stretching into eternity as he lined up his shot. Just as he was about to fire, the Intrepid shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the ship took a hit, sending a shockwave through the control panel. "Shields down to 60%, an officer shouted, panic lacing their voice. "Divert power to forward shields," Mira ordered, her focus unwavering. "We can't let them flank us." Ethan adjusted the ship's energy distribution, feeling the weight of their predicament. They were outnumbered, and the Thrax ships seemed relentless in their pursuit. With renewed determination, Ethan locked onto the command ship again. "Firing," he called out, releasing a concentrated burst of energy. The beam struck true, and the command ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, fragments scattering into the void. "Direct hit, one down," Mira cheered, but her triumph was short-lived. "Look out, more ships incoming from starboard." Ethan barely had time to react as another wave of Thrax vessels descended upon them, their weapons primed and ready. "We're surrounded," he shouted, adrenaline flooding his system. "Focus fire on the lead ship," Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "If we can take out their formation leader, we might cause confusion among the rest." Ethan obeyed, targeting the lead ship with fierce determination. The Intrepid's cannons roared as he fired again, watching as the energy beams struck the ship's hull. It shuddered, and for a moment he thought it might break apart. But just then, another Thrax ship opened fire, and Ethan barely managed to pull the Intrepid out of harm's way. "We can't keep this up forever," he yelled, frustration creeping into his voice. "Then we need to make our move now," Mira said, her eyes fierce with determination. "We have to break through their lines and make a run for their supply depot." Ethan's heart raced at the thought. It was a risky maneuver, but they had little choice. "Okay, let's do it." With a series of deft maneuvers, Ethan piloted the Intrepid toward the heart of the Thrax formation. The ship rocked as enemy fire pounded against their shields, but Mira remained steadfast, issuing commands and coordinating their attack. "Cover me," she shouted, her focus unyielding as she prepared to launch a torpedo at the nearest supply ship. "Engaging," Ethan responded, his fingers dancing across the controls as he fired at the approaching ships, creating a brief opening for Mira. The torpedo shot forth, striking the supply ship and causing a massive explosion that sent debris scattering in every direction. "Nice shot," Ethan yelled, exhilarated by the impact. "Now's our chance. Let's push through," Mira said, and with a final burst of speed, the Intrepid surged ahead, breaking through the Thrax lines. Ethan's heart raced as they burst into the relative calm beyond the enemy formation. For a brief moment, it felt like they had escaped, but the relief was short-lived. "We're not out of the woods yet," he warned, scanning the sensors for incoming threats. "Regroup with the Zelker ships," Mira ordered. "We need to secure our position and prepare for the next assault." As they linked up with the Zelker Syndicate vessels, Ethan quickly assessed their situation. The Coalition fleet had suffered damage, but morale remained high. They had taken down several enemy ships and disrupted the Thrax's command structure. The crew worked quickly to assess their status, and the atmosphere in the command center shifted from desperation to determination. Officers moved with purpose, relaying information and gathering data on the battle. "Status report," Mira called, her voice cutting through the bustle. "We've sustained some damage to our shields, but the hull is intact," an officer reported. "We're at 75% operational capacity." "Good. We'll need every bit of that for the next phase," Mira replied. "Ethan, I want you to analyze the data from the supply depot. We need to know what the Thrax have been transporting." Ethan nodded, diving into the tactical displays as he began to sift through the incoming data. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in his mind. The Thrax would retaliate. It was only a matter of time. After a few moments, a commotion erupted on the bridge as one of the officers shouted, "Incoming Thrax ships, they're coming for us." "Battle stations," Mira commanded, her voice steady. "Ethan, we need to get ready to defend our position." As Ethan prepared for the oncoming assault, he felt the tension in the air grow thick. They had gained some ground, but the Thrax were not going to let this defeat slide easily. The Thrax vessels emerged from the darkness, sleek and menacing as they bore down on the Coalition fleet. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he locked onto the nearest enemy ship, his instincts kicking in. "Engaging," he shouted, firing the Intrepid's cannons as energy beams lit up the darkness. The Coalition ships joined in, a symphony of destruction erupting as they fought back against the onslaught. Mira's commands rang out, directing their fire and focusing their efforts on the lead Thrax ship. "Target their engines," she instructed. "If we can disable them, we can slow their advance." Ethan aimed carefully, squeezing the trigger as he fired at the enemy engines. The beam struck true, and he watched as the Thrax ship shuddered, losing power and drifting off course. "Good job! Keep it up," Mira encouraged, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the battlefield. But even as they fought, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Thrax were more organized than ever. They were adapting quickly, and their tactics were becoming increasingly aggressive. "Reinforcements are coming in from the starboard side," an officer shouted. Ethan turned to see a new wave of Thrax vessels entering the fray, flanking the Coalition ships and cutting off their retreat. "We're being surrounded," he shouted, his heart pounding. "Focus fire! We can't let them close in," Mira called, her voice steady amid the chaos. Ethan fought against the rising tide of panic as he maneuvered the Intrepid, firing at the approaching ships. He felt the ship rock under the onslaught, and alarms blared as their shields began to falter again. "Shields down to 30%, an officer reported, anxiety creeping into their voice. Mira's expression hardened. "We need to regroup. Get the Zelker ships to cover our flanks." Ethan's heart raced as he realized how dire the situation had become. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the Thrax seemed relentless in their pursuit. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Mira ordered, and Ethan quickly adjusted the Intrepid's trajectory, weaving through the debris and enemy fire. Just as they seemed to be gaining some ground, another Thrax ship emerged from the shadows, its weapons primed and ready. "Incoming missiles!" an officer shouted, panic rising. "Evasive actions," Mira commanded, and Ethan pulled the ship into a steep dive, narrowly avoiding the oncoming barrage. The Intrepid shuddered as a missile grazed their shields, sending sparks flying across the control panel. "Keep it steady," Ethan yelled, adrenaline surging through him as he focused on the controls. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the lives of his crew hanging in the balance. "Target their command ship," Mira shouted, determination etched on her face. "We need to disrupt their coordination." Ethan locked onto the command ship, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. "Firing," he called, unleashing a powerful energy beam that struck the command ship's hull. The impact sent shockwaves through the area, and Ethan watched as the command ship faltered, its coordination breaking down. "Direct hit! They're losing their grip," he shouted. But just as they began to feel a glimmer of hope, the remaining Thrax vessels intensified their assault, pouring fire onto the Coalition ships. "Hold the line," Mira commanded, her voice resolute as she directed the crew. "We can't let them overwhelm us." Ethan's heart raced as he pushed the Intrepid to its limits, weaving between enemy fire and returning shots with deadly precision. He could feel the tension in the air, the stakes rising higher with each passing moment. "Shields down to 10%, an officer shouted, their voice trembling. "Divert all remaining power to the shields," Mira ordered. We need to hold on. As Ethan made the adjustments, he felt a pang of fear. They were running out of time, and the Thrax. The battlefield swirled around the Intrepid like a tempest, and Ethan's heart raced as the ship shuddered under the weight of the onslaught. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered ominously, casting shadows on the determined faces of the crew. They were holding on by a thread, but the Thrax fleet was relentless. "Shields at 5%, an officer shouted, their voice tinged with panic. "We can't take much more of this." Ethan gritted his teeth, his hands tightening around the controls. "We need to regroup and find a way to break through. If we can get to the supply depot, we can turn this fight around." Mira's eyes flickered with resolve. "Agreed. But first, we have to survive this assault. We need a distraction." "Leave that to me," Ethan replied, determination flooding his veins. He pulled the Intrepid into a steep climb, soaring above the chaos, and flipped the ship around to face the approaching Thrax vessels. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Mira called out, alarm rising in her voice. "I'm going to draw their fire," he shouted back. "If I can create an opening, we might be able to break through." "Don't be reckless," she warned, but Ethan had already committed to the plan. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he engaged the thrusters, sending the Intrepid plunging back into the fray. He wove through the debris, darting between the wreckage of fallen ships, drawing the attention of the Thrax vessels. "Here I am," he taunted, firing off bursts from the cannons. The enemy ships turned their focus toward him, eager to eliminate the threat. Ethan's heart pounded as he executed a series of risky maneuvers, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. The Intrepid spun and rolled, each move calculated to stay alive while luring the Thrax away from their flanks. "Keep the pressure on," Mira shouted from the command center, her voice unwavering even as the ship shook from enemy blasts. "We need to protect our rear." With a final burst of speed, Ethan swung the Intrepid around and blasted at a Thrax ship that had followed too closely, sending it spiraling out of control. "Got one," he yelled, a rush of exhilaration coursing through him. But the victory was fleeting. The remaining Thrax ships were closing in, and Ethan felt the weight of their combined firepower bearing down on him. "I can't keep this up for much longer," he called to Mira. "Just a little longer," she urged, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "If we can hold out, reinforcements are on their way." Ethan gritted his teeth and forced himself to focus. He had to keep the Thrax ships occupied. As he darted between blasts, he could see the Zelker Syndicate ships engaging in a fierce firefight, their tactics unorthodox but effective. "Zelker ships, fall back to our position," Mira commanded over the comms. "We need to regroup." The Syndicate ships responded, their pilots skillfully navigating the chaos. As they pulled back, the Thrax ships shifted their focus, eager to capitalize on the opportunity. "Now," Mira shouted, "strike while they're vulnerable." Ethan seized the moment, firing the Intrepid's cannons at the nearest Thrax ship, his heart racing as he felt the tide beginning to turn. "Engaging," he called out, determination surging within him. The Intrepid's weapons blazed as they joined the coalition's collective firepower. The combination of forces created a cascade of explosions, and Ethan felt a surge of hope. They were making headway, but the fight was far from over. "Zelker ships, coordinate with us," Mira called, her voice strong and confident. "Focus on their left flank." As they launched a concentrated attack, Ethan felt the rush of adrenaline again. He maneuvered the Intrepid alongside the Zelker ships, the synergy between the coalition forces igniting a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they pressed the attack. The tide of battle shifted as more enemy ships began to fall. "We're breaking through," Mira shouted, her voice full of triumph. "Now's our chance to move to the supply depot." Ethan felt a surge of energy at her words. "Let's do it," he adjusted their course, directing the Intrepid toward the supply depot, which loomed in the distance like a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As they approached, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. This was their opportunity to cripple the Thrax's resources, to hit them where it hurt the most. Mira, do we have intel on what we can expect at the depot? Yes, she replied, pulling up a holographic display of the facility. It's heavily guarded, but there are weak points we can exploit. If we can disable their primary power source, we can cause significant disruption. Let's go for it, Ethan said, determination hardening in his chest. I'll engage the enemy forces. You coordinate the strike. As they neared the depot, Ethan saw a cluster of Thrax ships patrolling the area. Looks like we've got company, he warned, narrowing his eyes at the approaching vessels. Engage and draw their fire, Mira commanded. We need to clear a path. Ethan didn't hesitate. He piloted the Intrepid forward, unleashing a barrage of fire at the nearest Thrax ships. Firing, he shouted, the cannons roaring to life. The enemy ships responded quickly, firing back with intensity. Watch your six, Mira warned, and Ethan swerved just in time to avoid a direct hit, feeling the rush of wind as the ship narrowly escaped destruction. Return fire, he called, redirecting the ship's cannons to strike at the approaching vessels. The battle raged on, a symphony of chaos echoing through the void. As the Intrepid surged forward, Ethan felt the tension rising. The Thrax ships were formidable, and they were beginning to adapt to his tactics. He could sense their focus shifting, and it filled him with urgency. Zelker ships, provide cover, Mira shouted, her voice steady as she directed their allies. We need to push through. Ethan executed a daring maneuver, rolling the Intrepid to evade incoming fire while returning shots at the flanking Thrax. The thrill of combat surged through him, but he couldn't let the excitement cloud his judgment. We're getting closer, he shouted, spotting the entrance to the depot. Almost there, Mira replied, her focus unwavering. Just a little longer. As they breached the perimeter of the supply depot, Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. The facility loomed before them, heavily fortified but vulnerable. I can see the power source, he called out, pointing at the pulsating energy core in the center of the complex. Prepare for boarding, Mira ordered, her eyes fixed on the target. We need to disable that power source to create a diversion. Ethan steered the Intrepid toward the docking bay, initiating a landing sequence. The ship settled down, and the crew rushed to prepare for their next move. All right, everyone, gear up and get ready, Mira commanded, her leadership shining through. Ethan felt a mix of fear and excitement as he donned his combat gear. They were about to step into the heart of enemy territory, and the stakes had never been higher. He glanced at Mira, who met his gaze with steely resolve. Let's do this, he said, a sense of determination flooding through him. Together, they led their team through the docking bay doors, stepping out into the chaos of the supply depot. The air crackled with tension as they moved quickly through the facility, their hearts racing with anticipation. As they navigated the halls, the sounds of battle echoed in the distance. They pressed forward, determined to reach the power source before it was too late. The corridors were dimly lit, the flickering lights adding to the sense of urgency. Keep moving, Mira urged, leading the way. We're almost there. Ethan could feel the adrenaline coursing through him as they approached the core room. The walls were lined with Thrax soldiers, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. We need to take them out before they alert the others, he whispered. On my mark, Mira instructed, her voice steady. 3, 2, 1. With a swift motion, they burst into the room, weapons raised. The Thrax soldiers turned in surprise, but it was too late. Ethan and Mira opened fire, their shots ringing out as they quickly dispatched the guards. Clear, Mira shouted, and they rushed inside, their eyes locking onto the pulsating power core. Let's disable it, Ethan said, quickly assessing the system. He could see the controls, but they were heavily encrypted. I need a moment. Cover us, Mira ordered, her voice resolute as she prepared for any incoming threats. As Ethan worked on the controls, his fingers flew across the panel. The hum of energy filled the room, and he felt the weight of time pressing down on him. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The alarms began to blare as he worked, the red lights flashing ominously. "They're on to us," Mira shouted, her eyes darting to the doorway. The battlefield swirled around the Intrepid like a tempest, and Ethan's heart raced as the ship shuddered under the weight of the onslaught. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered ominously, casting shadows on the determined faces of the crew. They were holding on by a thread, but the Thrax fleet was relentless. "Shields at 5%, an officer shouted, their voice tinged with panic. "We can't take much more of this." Ethan gritted his teeth, his hands tightening around the controls. "We need to regroup and find a way to break through. If we can get to the supply depot, we can turn this fight around." Mira's eyes flickered with resolve. "Agreed. But first, we have to survive this assault. We need a distraction." "Leave that to me," Ethan replied, determination flooding his veins. He pulled the Intrepid into a steep climb, soaring above the chaos, and flipped the ship around to face the approaching Thrax vessels. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Mira called out, alarm rising in her voice. "I'm going to draw their fire," he shouted back. "If I can create an opening, we might be able to break through." "Don't be reckless," she warned, but Ethan had already committed to the plan. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he engaged the thrusters, sending the Intrepid plunging back into the fray. He wove through the debris, darting between the wreckage of fallen ships, drawing the attention of the Thrax vessels. "Here I am," he taunted, firing off bursts from the cannons. The enemy ships turned their focus toward him, eager to eliminate the threat. Ethan's heart pounded as he executed a series of risky maneuvers, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. The Intrepid spun and rolled, each move calculated to stay alive while luring the Thrax away from their flanks. "Keep the pressure on," Mira shouted from the command center, her voice unwavering even as the ship shook from enemy blasts. "We need to protect our rear." With a final burst of speed, Ethan swung the Intrepid around and blasted at a Thrax ship that had followed too closely, sending it spiraling out of control. "Got one," he yelled, a rush of exhilaration coursing through him. But the victory was fleeting. The remaining Thrax ships were closing in, and Ethan felt the weight of their combined firepower bearing down on him. "I can't keep this up for much longer," he called to Mira. "Just a little longer," she urged, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "If we can hold out, reinforcements are on their way." Ethan gritted his teeth and forced himself to focus. He had to keep the Thrax ships occupied. As he darted between blasts, he could see the Zelker Syndicate ships engaging in a fierce firefight, their tactics unorthodox but effective. "Zelker ships, fall back to our position," Mira commanded over the comms. "We need to regroup." The Syndicate ships responded, their pilots skillfully navigating the chaos. As they pulled back, the Thrax ships shifted their focus, eager to capitalize on the opportunity. "Now," Mira shouted, "strike while they're vulnerable." Ethan seized the moment, firing the Intrepid's cannons at the nearest Thrax ship, his heart racing as he felt the tide beginning to turn. "Engaging," he called out, determination surging within him. The Intrepid's weapons blazed as they joined the Coalition's collective firepower. The combination of forces created a cascade of explosions, and Ethan felt a surge of hope. They were making headway, but the fight was far from over. "Zelker ships, coordinate with us," Mira called, her voice strong and confident. "Focus on their left flank." As they launched a concentrated attack, Ethan felt the rush of adrenaline again. He maneuvered the Intrepid alongside the Zelker ships, the synergy between the Coalition forces igniting a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they pressed the attack. The tide of battle shifted as more enemy ships began to fall. "We're breaking through," Mira shouted, her voice full of triumph. "Now is our chance to move to the supply depot." Ethan felt a surge of energy at her words. "Let's do it." He adjusted their course, directing the Intrepid toward the supply depot, which loomed in the distance like a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As they approached, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. This was their opportunity to cripple the Thrax's resources, to hit them where it hurt the most. "Mira, do we have intel on what we can expect at the depot?" Yes, she replied, pulling up a holographic display of the facility. It's heavily guarded, but there are weak points we can exploit. If we can disable their primary power source, we can cause significant disruption. Let's go for it, Ethan said, determination hardening in his chest. I'll engage the enemy forces. You coordinate the strike. As they neared the depot, Ethan saw a cluster of Thrax ships patrolling the area. Looks like we've got company, he warned, narrowing his eyes at the approaching vessels. Engage and draw their fire, Mira commanded. We need to clear a path. Ethan didn't hesitate. He piloted the Intrepid forward, unleashing a barrage of fire at the nearest Thrax ships. Firing, he shouted, the cannons roaring to life. The enemy ships responded quickly, firing back with intensity. Watch your six, Mira warned, and Ethan swerved just in time to avoid a direct hit, feeling the rush of wind as the ship narrowly escaped destruction. Return fire, he called, redirecting the ship's cannons to strike at the approaching vessels. The battle raged on, a symphony of chaos echoing through the void. As the Intrepid surged forward, Ethan felt the tension rising. The Thrax ships were formidable, and they were beginning to adapt to his tactics. He could sense their focus shifting, and it filled him with urgency. Zelker ships, provide cover, Mira shouted, her voice steady as she directed their allies. We need to push through. Ethan executed a daring maneuver, rolling the Intrepid to evade incoming fire while returning shots at the flanking Thrax. The thrill of combat surged through him, but he couldn't let the excitement cloud his judgment. We're getting closer, he shouted, spotting the entrance to the depot. Almost there, Mira replied, her focus unwavering. Just a little longer. As they breached the perimeter of the supply depot, Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. The facility loomed before them, heavily fortified but vulnerable. I can see the power source, he called out, pointing at the pulsating energy core in the center of the complex. Prepare for boarding, Mira ordered, her eyes fixed on the target. We need to disable that power source to create a diversion. Ethan steered the Intrepid toward the docking bay, initiating a landing sequence. The ship settled down, and the crew rushed to prepare for their next move. All right, everyone, gear up and get ready, Mira commanded, her leadership shining through. Ethan felt a mix of fear and excitement as he donned his combat gear. They were about to step into the heart of enemy territory, and the stakes had never been higher. He glanced at Mira, who met his gaze with steely resolve. Let's do this, he said, a sense of determination flooding through him. Together, they led their team through the docking bay doors, stepping out into the chaos of the supply depot. The air crackled with tension as they moved quickly through the facility, their hearts racing with anticipation. As they navigated the halls, the sounds of battle echoed in the distance. They pressed forward, determined to reach the power source before it was too late. The corridors were dimly lit, the flickering lights adding to the sense of urgency. Keep moving, Mira urged, leading the way. We're almost there. Ethan could feel the adrenaline coursing through him as they approached the core room. The walls were lined with Thrax soldiers, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. We need to take them out before they alert the others, he whispered. On my mark, Mira instructed, her voice steady. 3, 2, 1. With a swift motion, they burst into the room, weapons raised. The Thrax soldiers turned in surprise, but it was too late. Ethan and Mira opened fire, their shots ringing out as they quickly dispatched the guards. Clear, Mira shouted, and they rushed inside, their eyes locking onto the pulsating power core. Let's disable it, Ethan said, quickly assessing the system. He could see the controls, but they were heavily encrypted. I need a moment. Cover us, Mira ordered, her voice resolute as she prepared for any incoming threats. As Ethan worked on the controls, his fingers flew across the panel. The hum of energy filled the room, and he felt the weight of time pressing down on him. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The alarms began to blare as he worked, the red lights flashing ominously. They're on to us, Mira shouted, her eyes darting to the doorway. The alarms blared, reverberating off the walls of the supply depot like a harbinger of doom. Ethan's heart raced as he focused on the control panel, the complex encryption scrambling his thoughts. He had to disable the power core before the Thrax reinforcements arrived, and the clock was ticking. "Ethan, we need to move," Mira shouted, her eyes scanning the doorway as shadows flitted past. "We can't hold them off forever." "Just a few more seconds," he replied, determination fueling his fingers. The screen flickered with error messages, but he pushed through, recalling the training that had prepared him for this moment. "Come on," Mira urged, stepping closer to the entrance, weapon ready. "We're out of time." The sound of boots echoed through the corridor, and Ethan felt the pressure mount. He glanced up, catching a glimpse of Thrax soldiers rushing toward them. "Got it," he exclaimed, finally cracking the code. The console blinked, and the power core began to shudder ominously. "Let's go," Mira shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the exit. "We need to get out of here before it blows." Ethan followed Mira as they sprinted back through the depot's corridors, the blaring alarms growing louder with every step. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and he could hear the sound of boots pounding against the metal floors behind them. "Which way?" he gasped, trying to catch his breath as they reached a junction. "Left," Mira directed, pushing him forward. "That'll lead us back to the docking bay." They rounded the corner just as a group of Thrax soldiers appeared, weapons drawn. "Contact," one of them shouted, and a volley of energy blasts erupted toward them. "Get down," Mira yelled, diving to the side as Ethan followed suit, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. They returned fire, the energy beams lighting up the corridor as they fought back. "Cover me," Mira commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. She moved to flank the soldiers, her weapon blazing as she took aim. Ethan focused on the remaining soldiers, firing with precision as they engaged in a deadly dance of combat. He felt the adrenaline surging through his veins, the fear of failure driving him to push harder. With a final blast, they took down the last soldier, and the corridor fell silent. "Go, go, go," Mira urged, and they dashed forward, their hearts racing as they approached the docking bay. As they entered the docking bay, Ethan felt a surge of hope. The Intrepid was waiting, but the space was filled with chaos. Zelker ships were in a fierce firefight, and the atmosphere crackled with energy as Thrax soldiers flooded the area. "Get to the ship," Mira shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We can't let them stop us." They sprinted toward the Intrepid, weaving through the chaos as energy beams flew overhead. Ethan could feel the heat of battle all around them, the tension palpable. Just as they reached the ship, a burst of energy struck the docking bay, sending debris flying. "Watch out," Mira yelled, pulling Ethan to the ground as the explosion rocked the bay. Dust and smoke filled the air, and they struggled to regain their footing. "Get inside," Mira urged, and they clambered up the ship's ramp, diving into the cockpit. The control panel blinked with alerts, and Ethan quickly assessed their situation. "Shields are down to 30%, he reported, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Divert all power to shields and engines," Mira commanded, her eyes sharp as she scanned the displays. "We need to get out of here." Ethan adjusted the energy distribution, feeling the ship hum beneath him. The Intrepid's engines roared to life, and he felt a rush of exhilaration as they prepared for takeoff. But just as they were about to launch, an explosion rocked the bay again, sending shockwaves through the ship. "Hold on," Mira shouted, gripping the console as Ethan fought to stabilize the Intrepid. "We need to get airborne now." With a final push, Ethan initiated the launch sequence. The Intrepid surged forward, breaking free from the docking bay just as another wave of energy blasts illuminated the space behind them. He felt a surge of relief as they cleared the debris field, but it was short-lived. "Incoming fire," Mira shouted, her eyes wide with alarm. Ethan swerved the ship to evade the energy beams, his heart racing as he maneuvered through the chaos. "I see them," he yelled, his focus razor-sharp. "Return fire. We need to buy ourselves some time," Mira commanded, her voice unwavering despite the panic surrounding them. Ethan fired back, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts at the pursuing Thrax ships. The explosions lit up the void, a dazzling display of destruction as they fought for their lives. But the Thrax were relentless, their ships closing in as the Intrepid surged forward. "Reinforcements are on the way," Mira shouted, her voice echoing through the cockpit. "We just need to hold them off a little longer." Ethan gritted his teeth, pushing the Intrepid to its limits. The ship shuddered under the strain, but he refused to give in. They had come too far to fail now. As they navigated the chaotic battlefield, Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The supply depot loomed behind them, now engulfed in flames. He couldn't shake the feeling of loss. They had destroyed a significant Thrax resource, but at what cost? "Ethan, focus," Mira urged, snapping him back to reality. "We need to regroup with the coalition forces." "Right," he replied, shaking off his doubts. He locked onto the nearest Zelker ship, feeling a sense of camaraderie as they fought together against the Thrax. The energy beams continued to fly around them, but the coalition ships were holding strong. They were regrouping, forming a defensive line against the relentless Thrax assault. "Get ready for a counterattack," Mira shouted, her eyes sharp as she scanned the battlefield. "We can't let them take us down." Ethan's hands moved deftly over the controls as he initiated a series of evasive maneuvers. The Intrepid danced through the chaos, narrowly avoiding incoming fire while returning shots at the nearest Thrax ships. "Direct hit," he shouted as one of the enemy vessels exploded, sending debris scattering into the void. "Keep it up," Mira encouraged, her voice steady as she coordinated their attacks. "We need to take down their numbers." As the battle raged on, Ethan felt a surge of determination. They had fought hard, and he refused to let their sacrifices be in vain. He pushed the Intrepid to its limits, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. Just when it seemed like the Thrax would overwhelm them, a wave of reinforcements surged onto the battlefield. Coalition ships, glinting in the light of distant stars, poured in from the depths of space, joining the fight. "Reinforcements," Mira shouted, her voice filled with hope. "We might just turn this around." Ethan felt a rush of relief as the additional ships engaged the Thrax forces, creating a distraction that allowed the coalition to regroup. "Let's push forward," he called out, directing the Intrepid toward the heart of the conflict. With the added firepower, the coalition began to regain ground, pushing back against the Thrax ships. The tide of battle shifted, and Ethan felt a sense of exhilaration as the energy beams lit up the darkness. "Target their command ships," Mira shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "If we can disrupt their coordination, we'll have a chance." Ethan locked onto the nearest command ship, his hands steady as he took aim. "Firing," he called, releasing a concentrated energy beam that struck the ship's hull. The command ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, fragments scattering into the void. "One down," he shouted, exhilaration coursing through him. "Keep it up," Mira urged, her eyes alight with determination. "We can do this." With the Thrax command structure in disarray, the coalition pressed their advantage. Ships surged forward, energy beams colliding as they fought fiercely against the remaining enemy vessels. Ethan felt the exhilaration of victory surging within him as they continued to push the Thrax back. The tide of battle was shifting in their favor, and he could sense the momentum building. "Target the remaining Thrax ships," Mira commanded, her voice filled with confidence. "Let's finish this." Ethan focused on the nearest enemy vessel, locking on and firing with precision. The energy beam struck true, and he watched as the ship exploded in a brilliant display of destruction. "Good shot," Mira cheered, and Ethan felt a surge of pride. They were fighting together, and the camaraderie filled him with hope. With each passing moment, the Thrax forces dwindled. The coalition ships rallied together, forming a united front that overwhelmed the remaining enemy vessels. The space around them was filled with chaos and destruction, but victory was within reach. "Let's keep pushing," Mira shouted, her eyes shining with determination. We can end this once and for all. Ethan felt the weight of the moment as he piloted the Intrepid forward. They had come so far, and he refused to let it slip away. With a final push, they surged into the heart of the conflict. The battle raged around them, a cacophony of explosions and energy blasts illuminating the vast expanse of space. Ethan's hands flew over the controls of the Intrepid, adrenaline coursing through him as he maneuvered through the chaos. Every flick of the ship's thrusters felt electric, and the stakes were higher than ever. "Keep your eyes on the prize," Mira shouted, her voice resolute despite the intensity of the fight. "We need to push deeper into their formation." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of determination rising within him. They were on the cusp of victory, but the Thrax were fierce and resilient. "I'm targeting the next command ship," he called out, locking onto the vessel that loomed ominously ahead. The ship's hull was battered, but it still glimmered with the power of its shields. Ethan unleashed a volley of energy blasts, watching as they impacted against the hull, each hit accompanied by a satisfying explosion. "Direct hits, keep it up," Mira urged, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. "We need to create a breach in their defenses." Ethan felt the thrill of combat surging through him. He dove the Intrepid closer to the command ship, expertly weaving between incoming fire. "I'm going in," he shouted, determination hardening his voice. "Be careful," Mira warned, her focus unyielding. "We can't afford to lose you now." As they closed the distance, the command ship's shields flickered under the barrage of their fire. Ethan pushed the Intrepid to its limits, executing a daring maneuver that took them beneath the enemy's defenses. "Firing torpedoes," he yelled, releasing a pair of missiles that shot forward with deadly precision. The torpedoes struck the command ship, igniting a chain reaction that lit up the darkness. "Nice shot," Mira cheered, her voice ringing with pride. "Now let's move." With the command ship's defenses breached, a gap opened in the Thrax formation. Ethan seized the opportunity, propelling the Intrepid forward into the heart of the enemy fleet. The remaining Thrax ships began to falter, their formations breaking apart as the coalition pushed through. "Now's our chance to capitalize," Mira shouted, her eyes alight with determination. "Let's flank them." Ethan grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as they dove deeper into the fray. They fired at the nearest enemy vessels, energy beams striking true and sending ships spiraling into oblivion. The tide of battle was shifting, and the sense of victory was palpable. As they pressed forward, Ethan could see the coalition ships rallying around them, forming a united front against the dwindling Thrax forces. Each explosion felt like a victory, a testament to their resilience and courage. "Focus fire on the remaining command ships," Mira directed, her voice steady. "We need to eliminate their leadership to secure our victory." Ethan nodded, targeting another command ship that was attempting to rally its forces. "Firing," he called out, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that struck the ship's shields, weakening its defenses. The Thrax vessel returned fire, energy beams slicing through space, but Ethan maneuvered the Intrepid expertly, evading the incoming shots. "They're not going to give up easily," he shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Neither are we," Mira replied fiercely, her eyes locked on the tactical display. "Let's finish this." As the Intrepid engaged in a fierce exchange of fire with the command ship, Ethan felt the rush of battle washing over him. He could see the coalition ships working in unison, their coordinated attacks overwhelming the enemy. "Watch your six," Mira called out suddenly, and Ethan swerved to avoid a barrage of energy blasts from a nearby Thrax ship. "We can't afford to get complacent." "Got it," he replied, focusing on the immediate threat. He turned the ship to engage, returning fire with precision. The Thrax vessel erupted in flames, debris scattering into the void. "Good work," Mira cheered, her confidence infectious. "Now let's keep moving." With their enemies reeling, the coalition pressed the attack. Ethan felt the exhilaration of victory surging through him as they surged forward, taking advantage of the chaos within the Thrax ranks. "Target the last command ship," Mira shouted, her voice ringing with authority. We need to end this fight once and for all. Ethan locked onto the final command ship, the last bastion of Thrax leadership. The ship was surrounded by a desperate circle of defenders, but they were faltering under the relentless assault. Firing, Ethan called out, unleashing a volley of energy blasts that struck the command ship's shields. The vessel shuddered under the impact, and he felt a surge of triumph. "Keep the pressure on," Mira urged. "We're almost there." With each blast, the command ship's shields flickered, weakening under the combined assault. The coalition forces rallied together, pushing back the Thrax defenders and creating a path toward the ship. "Now," Mira shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Let's finish this." Thrax responded. As the coalition ships began their feint, Ethan watched as the Thrax vessels shifted, their focus diverting toward the apparent threat. The tactical display lit up with alerts, and he felt the tension rise. "Now's our chance," Ethan said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "Prepare to move in." "Coordinates set," Mira confirmed, her voice steady. "Let's strike while they're distracted." Ethan nodded, throttling the Intrepid forward as they closed in on the moon. The Thrax ships were now focused on the Zelker fleet, and the moment felt electric with possibility. As they approached the surface of Akron's moon, Ethan felt the familiar rush of combat. The moon's landscape was rugged, with rocky outcroppings and deep craters, a perfect environment for a surprise attack. "Activating scanners," Mira said, her eyes glued to the displays. "We need to locate their command center and disable their communications." "Agreed," Ethan replied, deftly maneuvering the Intrepid through the treacherous terrain. "We'll keep a low profile until we're in position." As they glided through the craters, Ethan spotted a cluster of Thrax vessels stationed near what appeared to be a makeshift command center. "There it is," he said, his voice low. "Let's get in closer." Locking onto their communications array, Mira said, her focus unwavering. "Once we're in range, I'll initiate a disruption." Ethan felt the tension mount as they crept closer, the Thrax unaware of their impending assault. The adrenaline coursed through him, heightening his senses as they prepared to strike. "Ready on my mark," he said, his heart pounding. "Waiting for your signal," Mira confirmed, her fingers poised above the console. As they closed in, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They were counting on him, and failure was not an option. "Now," he shouted, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the air. The explosions rocked the command center, sending debris flying as chaos erupted. Thrax soldiers scrambled to respond, but Ethan and Mira were already moving, their eyes fixed on the target. "Disrupting communications now," Mira yelled, her fingers flying over the controls. The console lit up with alerts as the Thrax's communications network faltered, creating confusion among their ranks. "Excellent work," Ethan shouted, maneuvering the Intrepid through the mayhem. "Let's hit their power core next." He expertly dodged incoming fire, feeling the familiar thrill of the chase. The Thrax were scrambling, their response disorganized, and they needed to capitalize on it. "Power core located," Mira called out, her eyes sharp as she tracked the target. "I'm locking on." "Firing," Ethan shouted, releasing another wave of energy blast that struck the power core. The impact sent shockwaves through the area, illuminating the darkness. As the core erupted in a brilliant explosion, Ethan felt a surge of triumph. The chaos among the Thrax deepened, and the coalition was gaining ground. "Let's push forward," Mira shouted, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can't let them regroup." Ethan maneuvered the Intrepid through the wreckage, their path clearing as the Thrax struggled to regain control. The coalition ships had followed suit, engaging the remaining enemy forces with renewed vigor. "Coalition forces are moving in," Mira reported, her voice steady amidst the chaos. "We're making significant progress." Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration as they surged forward, engaging the remaining Thrax vessels. "Keep up the pressure, we can end this today." The battlefield was alive with energy beams and explosions, each blast marking a hard-fought victory. Ethan felt a sense of unity with his allies, a shared purpose that transcended their individual struggles. As they engaged the last remnants of the Thrax forces, Ethan's heart raced. "Let's finish this," he shouted, his voice ringing with conviction. Hours later, as the smoke cleared and the last of the Thrax vessels retreated, Ethan felt a mix of emotions wash over him. They had achieved a significant victory, but at what cost? "Status report," Mira said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Ethan glanced at the displays, which showed the remnants of the Thrax forces fleeing into the depths of space. "We've pushed them back, but they won't stay down for long. We need to regroup and reinforce our defenses." Mira nodded, her expression serious. "Agreed. We can't let our guard down. They'll likely regroup and come at us again." As the coalition forces began to assess their losses and repair their ships, Ethan took a moment to reflect on the battle. The exhilaration of victory was tempered by the weight of what had been lost, the lives forever changed. "Let's make sure we honor those we lost today," he said, his voice firm. "We fight for them, and for everyone who believes in our cause." Mira nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. "We will. Together, we will build a stronger future." As the coalition regrouped, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had fought fiercely, and they would continue to stand united against the Thrax threat. The path ahead would be challenging, but they had proven that they were capable of greatness. With plans set in motion, the coalition leaders convened to discuss their next steps. Ethan and Mira took their places among them, ready to contribute to the discussions. "The Thrax will be back," one of the Zelker commanders stated, his voice grave. "We need to fortify our defenses and prepare for their next move." Ethan nodded, his heart racing at the thought of the battles still to come. "We need to establish a secure perimeter around our supply lines and ensure that we're ready for any incursions." Mira chimed in, her voice steady. "We should also consider launching a reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on their movements. If we can predict their tactics, we can counter them effectively." The coalition's command center buzzed with activity as leaders from various factions gathered to strategize their next moves. Ethan sat at a large hollow table, his eyes scanning the maps and projections that flickered in the dim light. The mood was tense, a mixture of hope and apprehension hanging in the air. Mira leaned over the table, pointing to a series of marked coordinates. "We need to reinforce our defenses around the Akron system and consider possible Thrax movement patterns. They're going to want to retaliate quickly, and we can't afford to be caught off guard." Ethan nodded, his mind racing with the possibilities. "What about launching a counteroffensive? If we can disrupt their supply lines before they fully regroup, we can buy ourselves some time." The Zelker commander, Tharok, raised an eyebrow. "That's a risky maneuver. We don't know how many ships they've rallied. It could easily turn into a trap." "True," Mira replied, her tone calm but firm. "But waiting for them to strike first could be even more dangerous. If we allow them to consolidate their forces, we risk losing the initiative." "Agreed," Ethan said, feeling a surge of determination. "We need to be proactive. We've already shown we can outmaneuver them. Now we need to exploit that advantage." Tharok rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Very well. If we can gather enough intelligence on their current locations, we might be able to strike effectively without overextending ourselves." As discussions continued, Ethan felt the urgency of their situation. They had won a significant battle, but the Thrax were a formidable enemy. Every decision made now could determine the fate of countless lives. "Let's deploy reconnaissance teams," Mira suggested. "We can send out scout ships to gather intel on Thrax movements. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be." "Agreed," Tharok said, his expression firm. "We'll split our forces. While some scout for Thrax locations, others will reinforce our existing defenses." The plan was set in motion, and Ethan felt a sense of purpose wash over him. They were taking action, pushing forward despite the uncertainty ahead. The coalition was beginning to act like a cohesive unit. each faction working together toward a common goal. As they prepared for their mission, Ethan found himself reflecting on the battle they had just fought. The faces of the fallen lingered in his mind, a reminder of the stakes they faced. He had to honor their sacrifice by ensuring that their struggle was not in vain. "Are you ready for this?" Mira asked, her voice breaking through his thoughts. She stood beside him, her expression a mix of confidence and concern. "I am," he replied, meeting her gaze. "We'll do everything we can to protect our people, together." Hours later, Ethan found himself at the helm of the Intrepid once more, ready to lead a small team of Coalition scouts into the depths of space. Mira sat beside him, her focus unwavering as they prepared to launch. "Scout ships are ready," she said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We'll maintain communication with the main fleet, but we need to be cautious. The Thrax could be lurking anywhere." Ethan nodded, feeling the familiar rush of excitement mixed with trepidation. "Let's move out." With a flick of his wrist, he propelled the Intrepid into the void, the stars blurring past them as they entered hyperspace. The sensation of speed was exhilarating, and he felt a sense of camaraderie with his crew, united in their mission. As they exited hyperspace near the Akron system, the vastness of space greeted them once more. Ethan activated the ship's scanners, eager to gather as much information as possible. "Scanners are live," Mira reported, her eyes scanning the data. "I'm detecting several Thrax ships on the outskirts of the system. Looks like they're still trying to regroup." Ethan leaned closer, studying the readouts. "We need to get closer. If we can confirm their locations, we can report back to the main fleet." "Be careful," Mira cautioned. "They might have patrols in place." With a determined nod, Ethan maneuvered the Intrepid deeper into Thrax territory, his heart racing as they approached the enemy ships. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, a shared understanding of the risks they were taking. As they drew nearer, Ethan spotted a group of Thrax vessels clustered together, seemingly unaware of their presence. "This could be our chance," he whispered, instinctively lowering his voice. "Let's get as close as we can without being detected," Mira suggested, her fingers tapping furiously on the console. "I'll try to get a read on their communications." Ethan piloted the Intrepid with precision, skirting around the edges of the Thrax formation. The sight of the enemy ships sent a thrill of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. This was the heart of their adversaries' territory, and they were about to delve into the unknown. "Just a little closer," Mira urged, her focus intense. "I think I can tap into their comms." Ethan gritted his teeth, navigating the ship into position. The Thrax ships loomed ahead, their dark forms a reminder of the danger they faced. "Got it," Mira exclaimed, her eyes widening. "I'm picking up their communications. It sounds like they're planning a large-scale offensive against the Coalition. They're regrouping at a nearby staging area." Ethan's heart sank as he processed the information. "We need to relay this back to the main fleet immediately. If they're planning an attack, we have to be ready." "Sending the data now," Mira confirmed, her fingers flying over the controls. "We can't afford to waste any time." Suddenly, the Intrepid's alarms blared to life, pulling Ethan's attention away from the data feed. "What's happening?" he demanded, his heart racing. "Thrax patrols," Mira shouted, her voice urgent. "They've detected us." Ethan swore under his breath as he quickly assessed the situation. "Engage evasive maneuvers. We can't let them pin us down." He yanked the control stick, sending the Intrepid into a sharp roll as energy blasts shot past them, illuminating the void. The cockpit rattled, and Ethan's adrenaline surged. "More ships are joining the fray," Mira warned, her eyes wide. "They're trying to encircle us." "Hold on," Ethan shouted, expertly navigating the ship through the incoming fire. He felt the thrill of the chase coursing through him, a dangerous dance between life and death. "Return fire," he commanded, targeting the closest Thrax vessel. Energy blasts shot from the Intrepid, striking true and sending the enemy ship spiraling into the abyss. "Nice shot," Mira cheered, her voice a beacon amidst the chaos. "But we can't stay here. We need to break free." Ethan gritted his teeth, concentrating on the maneuvers. The Intrepid was built for speed, and he needed to exploit that advantage. "I'm going to take us into the asteroid belt," he decided, his mind racing. "It'll give us cover." "Good thinking," Mira agreed. "But it'll be tricky. We need to be careful." With a flick of his wrist, Ethan piloted the Intrepid into the asteroid field, the ship darting between massive rocks and debris. The chaos of battle faded slightly as they entered the belt, but the danger was far from over. "Keep an eye on the scanners," Ethan instructed, his heart pounding in his chest. "We need to know if they're still following us." Mira nodded, her fingers flying over the console. "They're trying to follow, but the asteroids are making it difficult for them. We might have a chance to lose them." Ethan grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as he weaved through the rocky formations. Each twist and turn felt like a game of cat and mouse, and he was determined to outsmart the Thrax. "Watch out!" Mira shouted suddenly, pointing at a massive asteroid looming ahead. Ethan swerved sharply, barely avoiding a collision. The Intrepid shuddered as they narrowly escaped, and he felt the rush of adrenaline course through him. That was too close. "Keep going," Mira urged, her eyes locked on the scanners. "We need to put some distance between us and them." Ethan pushed the Intrepid to its limits, darting between the asteroids with precision. The chaos of the battle felt distant, and for a brief moment he was lost in the thrill of the chase. As they navigated deeper into the asteroid field, Ethan felt the tension begin to ease. The Thrax ships struggled to maneuver through the debris, and their pursuers fell behind. "Looks like we're losing them," Mira reported, her voice tinged with relief. "We might just make it out of here." "Let's not celebrate just yet," Ethan replied, keeping his focus sharp. "We need to find a safe route back to the main fleet." They continued weaving through the asteroid field, the tension in the cockpit slowly dissipating as they put distance between themselves and the Thrax. Eventually, the scanners began to clear, indicating that they were no longer in immediate danger. The Intrepid glided through the asteroid field, a shadow among the rocks as Ethan and Mira focused on navigating their path back to safety. The adrenaline of their recent escape still buzzed in the air, but the gravity of their situation was not lost on either of them. They had narrowly avoided a disaster, but the Thrax were still out there, regrouping and plotting their next move. Approaching a clear passage, Mira announced, her eyes bright with concentration. "If we make it through this section, we should have a straight shot to the main fleet." "Let's hope the Thrax don't decide to look for us here," Ethan replied, his grip on the controls tightening. "We've already pushed our luck once today." As they maneuvered through the rocky maze, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the Coalition and the larger battle ahead. The intel they'd gathered about the Thrax's impending offensive weighed heavily on him. They needed to relay that information to the other commanders as soon as possible. "Got it," Mira exclaimed, breaking his reverie. "We're through, setting course for the rendezvous point." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Good work, Mira. Let's get back to the fleet and warn them about the Thrax's plans." With a flick of a switch, Ethan engaged the ship's engines, and the Intrepid surged forward into open space. The familiar sight of stars twinkled ahead, a comforting reminder of the vastness beyond their immediate struggles. As they approached the Coalition's main fleet, Ethan felt a mix of relief and urgency. They had to share what they had learned. The fleet was a sprawling collection of ships, some still bearing the scars of the recent battle, but all standing resolute. "Intrepid, this is command," a voice crackled over the comms. "We've been monitoring your position. Do you have any updates?" "Mira, send them the intel," Ethan replied, his heart racing. "They need to know what we found." "Transmitting now," she confirmed, her fingers flying over the console. "We gathered intel on a Thrax regrouping point and their planned offensive." "Copy that. Stand by for further instructions," the voice on the comm replied. "We'll relay the information to the commanders." Ethan turned to Mira, a sense of urgency brewing within him. We need to meet with the Command Council. They have to know how imminent the Thrax threat is. Agreed, she said, her expression resolute. Let's head to the briefing room. As they exited the cockpit and made their way through the corridors of the Intrepid, Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They had survived the day, but the war was far from over. The briefing room was filled with leaders from various factions, their faces tense with concern. Ethan and Mira entered, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. "Ethan, Mira," Tharok greeted them, his voice steady. "We've been waiting for your report." Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We encountered a group of Thrax vessels regrouping near Akron. They're planning a large-scale offensive against us. We need to prepare immediately." The room erupted into murmurs, concern etched on every face. Tharok raised a hand for silence. "What do we know about their numbers and intentions?" Mira stepped forward, her confidence shining through. "We tracked their communications. They're mobilizing a significant force. If we don't act quickly, we could face a full-scale assault." A human commander, General Corrin, furrowed his brow. "We cannot allow them to consolidate their forces. We must strike first." "Agreed," Ethan interjected. "But we have to do it strategically. A frontal assault could be disastrous. We need to draw them out and hit their supply lines." The council members nodded, the gravity of the situation settling in. "What do you propose?" Tharok asked. "We can launch a series of targeted strikes on their supply routes," Ethan suggested. "If we disrupt their logistics, we can weaken their offensive capabilities before it even begins." Corrin leaned back, considering. "And what of our own defenses? We need to fortify our position while we conduct these strikes." "Absolutely," Mira replied. "We'll need to divide our forces to ensure we can defend against any unexpected attacks while also going on the offensive." The room buzzed with conversation as plans began to take shape. Ethan felt a sense of unity amongst the leaders, each one committed to their cause, driven by the shared understanding of what was at stake. As the discussions continued, Ethan felt a rush of purpose. They were coming together, pooling their resources and strengths for a common goal. He knew that the battle ahead would not be easy, but they had a chance if they worked together. "Let's coordinate our ships," Ethan proposed, his voice cutting through the noise. "We can create a combined strike force. That way, we'll have enough firepower to take out their supply routes while keeping our defenses strong." Tharok nodded, his expression grave. "We'll need to assign ships to cover the major supply lines. We can't afford to lose any vessels in the process." Mira added, "We should also establish a relay system for communications. If we can coordinate our strikes, we'll minimize the risk of being caught off guard." "Excellent suggestions," Tharok said. "Let's begin organizing our forces. We need to be ready to act within the next few days." As the plan solidified, Ethan felt a sense of determination surge through him. They were preparing for war, but they weren't doing it alone. Each leader in the room understood the stakes, and together they would fight back against the Thrax. In the days that followed, the coalition's preparations intensified. Ethan spent hours coordinating with different factions, ensuring that everyone was aligned in their efforts. He felt a growing sense of camaraderie with his allies, the shared experiences of battle forging stronger bonds. Mira remained by his side, her insights invaluable as they navigated the complexities of their strategy. Together, they worked tirelessly, drafting plans and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Mira asked one evening as they reviewed the final preparations. The glow of the screens cast soft shadows across her face, and Ethan could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. "I believe we are," he replied, his voice steady. "We've trained for this, and we've fought together before. We know what's at stake." "But it's different this time," she said softly. "We're not just defending ourselves, we're striking first." Ethan turned to her, feeling a surge of empathy. "I know it's a risk, but it's a necessary one. If we don't take the fight to them, they'll only grow stronger." Mira nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. I just hope we don't underestimate them again. The Thrax are cunning. We'll be prepared this time, Ethan assured her. We've learned from our past mistakes. We won't let our guard down. As they continued their preparations, the tension in the air began to shift. There was an undeniable sense of anticipation building among the coalition forces. The calm before the storm felt almost palpable, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Finally, the day of their planned offensive arrived. Ethan stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, his heart racing as he surveyed the fleet gathered around them. Ships of all shapes and sizes filled the void, a testament to their unity. Status report, he commanded, his voice firm. Ready for deployment, Mira replied, her eyes scanning the displays. All ships are in position. We're awaiting your order to engage. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. All right, everyone. This is our chance to turn the tide. We've trained for this, and we've come together as one. Let's show the Thrax that we will not be pushed around any longer. The crew erupted into cheers, a wave of energy surging through the bridge. Ethan felt a renewed sense of determination wash over him. Commence the offensive, he shouted, his heart pounding with exhilaration. With that, the Intrepid surged forward, leading the charge as the coalition fleet followed closely behind. Energy beams lit up the darkness of space as they engaged the Thrax supply routes, determined to disrupt their plans before they could fully mobilize. As they approached the Thrax supply line, the chaos of battle erupted around them. Ethan guided the Intrepid through the onslaught of energy blasts, his focus razor-sharp as he coordinated their strikes. Target the supply ships, he shouted. We need to cut off their resources. Mira's fingers flew over the controls, issuing commands to their allies. Zelker ships, flank the supply line, cut off their escape routes. The coalition forces moved as one, a synchronized dance of destruction. Ethan felt the thrill of battle coursing through him, the adrenaline pushing him forward as they pressed their advantage. Engaging enemy vessels, Mira reported, her voice steady amidst the chaos. We're making progress. Ethan navigated the Intrepid through the turmoil, weaving between enemy ships as he targeted their supply transports. Each successful hit sent a wave of triumph through him, fueling his determination. The chaos of battle unfolded around Ethan as the Intrepid plunged deeper into the fray. Energy blasts erupted from all directions, illuminating the dark expanse of space with flashes of brilliant color. The cacophony of explosions and alarms filled the air, creating a symphony of war that both exhilarated and terrified him. Ethan, we need to divert to the left, Mira shouted, pointing at a cluster of enemy ships closing in on their flank. They're trying to encircle us. On it, Ethan replied, adjusting the controls with practiced precision. He banked the Intrepid sharply, evading a barrage of fire that whizzed past them. The ship shuddered as they narrowly missed a direct hit, and Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Focus on the supply transports, he urged, eyes scanning the battlefield for potential targets. If we can disrupt their logistics, we'll cripple their ability to fight back. As they maneuvered, Ethan could see coalition ships engaging Thrax vessels, explosions erupting like fireworks across the dark canvas of space. The coordinated strikes of their allied forces were starting to pay off, but the Thrax were responding with fierce retaliation. Enemy reinforcements are arriving, Mira reported, her voice tense. We need to keep pushing before they regroup. Let's make it count, Ethan said, determination fueling his resolve. Target the closest supply ship. With a quick flick of his wrist, Ethan locked onto a nearby supply transport, its hull bristling with cargo containers. He could see energy beams striking it from other coalition vessels, the ship's shields flickering under the assault. Firing, he announced, unleashing a volley of energy blasts from the Intrepid's cannons. The shots connected, piercing the transport's shields and igniting a brilliant explosion. The ship broke apart, scattering debris across the battlefield. Nice shot, Mira exclaimed, a glint of pride in her eyes. That's one less supply ship for them. But their victory was short-lived as a pair of Thrax fighters swooped in, their sleek forms gliding through the debris field. Ethan's heart raced as he felt the intensity of the engagement escalate. "Two fighters on our tail," Mira warned, her fingers dancing over the controls. "They're closing in fast." "Evasive maneuvers," Ethan commanded, instinctively pulling the control stick to the side as he executed a sharp turn. The Intrepid rolled and dove, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. The cockpit rattled as energy blasts grazed their hull, the intensity of the battle shaking him to his core. "Return fire," he shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Let's show them what we're made of." Ethan unleashed a barrage of shots at the pursuing fighters, the energy beams arcing through space toward their targets. One of the Thrax ships exploded in a brilliant flash, scattering debris in every direction. The second fighter, however, proved to be more agile. "It's still on us," Mira shouted, her voice rising with urgency. "We need to shake it." Ethan gritted his teeth, feeling the pressure mount. "I'm going to try a high-speed roll. Hold on." With determination, he executed the maneuver, the Intrepid spinning gracefully through the air. The Thrax fighter attempted to follow, but the sudden shift in speed sent it careening off course. "Now," Mira shouted, locking onto the enemy ship. Firing. The energy beams struck true, the fighter exploding in a fiery plume that lit up the void. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling a rush of exhilaration. "That's how it's done," he cheered, a sense of camaraderie swelling within him. "Let's keep pushing," Mira urged, eyes scanning for more targets. "We can't let up now." As they pressed forward, Ethan could see the tide of battle shifting. The coalition forces were making significant headway, systematically dismantling the Thrax supply lines. But even amidst their victories, the Thrax were relentless. "More ships incoming from the left," Mira warned, her eyes wide. "They're trying to flank us." "Regroup with the others," Ethan commanded, his voice steady. "We can't allow them to break our formation." The Intrepid veered toward a cluster of coalition ships, their formations tightening as they prepared to face the incoming Thrax onslaught. Energy beams lit up the space around them, illuminating the chaos and intensity of battle. Ethan felt the adrenaline coursing through him, fueling his determination. He couldn't let fear dictate their actions. They were fighting for their homes, for their people, and they had come too far to falter now. "Engage defensive formations," he ordered, feeling a surge of confidence. "Let's hold the line." As coalition ships responded to his command, they formed a united front against the advancing Thrax. Energy beams exchanged between the two sides, illuminating the dark expanse of space in a dazzling display of light and destruction. Amidst the chaos, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the people they were fighting for. Families huddled in shelters, children yearning for a future without war. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, the knowledge that their actions could change the course of history. "Mira, are you okay?" he asked, glancing at her. "I'm good," she replied, her focus unwavering. "Just trying to keep track of the incoming threats." "Just remember to breathe," he said, a soft smile breaking through the tension. "We'll get through this together." Her expression softened, and for a moment, the chaos around them faded into the background. They were a team, united by their shared experiences, and together they could face anything. As the battle raged on, Ethan and Mira continued to coordinate with their allies, executing well-timed strikes against Thrax supply ships and enemy vessels. The tide of battle began to turn in their favor, but the Thrax were not finished yet. "Watch out," Mira shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "They're launching a counterattack." A swarm of Thrax fighters emerged from behind a cluster of asteroids, their numbers overwhelming. Ethan felt a surge of urgency as the Thrax made their move. "We can't let them breach our lines," he shouted, gripping the controls tightly. "We need to rally our forces." Mira nodded, her eyes focused. "I'm patching through to the other ships. We need to coordinate our defenses." Ethan piloted the Intrepid toward the approaching swarm, determination fueling his actions. Engage evasive maneuvers, we have to hold them off. The Intrepid darted through the incoming fire, expertly navigating the chaos of the battlefield. Energy beams grazed their hull, rattling the ship, but Ethan's focus remained sharp. He needed to protect his crew and his allies. Firing at will, he shouted, unleashing a barrage of shots at the incoming fighters. The Intrepid's cannons roared to life, energy beams slicing through the void as they targeted the enemy ships. The coalition ships responded to his command, forming a defensive line against the Thrax. Energy blasts erupted in every direction as they fought to maintain control over the battlefield. "We're holding them back," Mira shouted, her excitement palpable. "But we need to push them back further." Ethan felt a surge of determination. "Let's break their formation. Target the flagship at the rear." Mira's fingers danced over the controls, and the Intrepid locked onto the Thrax flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weaponry. "Firing," she announced, her voice steady. The energy beams connected, striking the flagship and sending shockwaves through the surrounding ships. The Thrax forces faltered, their formation breaking as they reeled from the attack. "Now's our chance," Ethan shouted, adrenaline surging through him. "Let's finish this." With a fierce battle cry, he led the charge toward the Thrax flagship, the coalition ships following closely behind. The battlefield erupted in chaos as they pressed the advantage, determined to break the Thrax's hold. As they closed in on the flagship, Ethan felt a surge of hope. They were on the verge of victory, but the Thrax were desperate. The flagship unleashed a torrent of fire, the intensity of its assault threatening to overwhelm their forces. "Ethan, they're targeting us," Mira warned, her voice rising in urgency. "We need to maneuver." Ethan gritted his teeth, pulling the control stick to the side as the Intrepid swerved to avoid the incoming fire. "Stay focused, we can't let up now." "Almost there," Mira shouted, her eyes locked on the targeting systems. "Just a little closer." As the Intrepid closed the distance, Ethan unleashed a barrage of shots at the flagship. The energy blast struck true, piercing its shields and igniting a series of explosions across its hull. "Keep firing," he shouted, feeling the thrill of the fight surge through him. "We can't let them recover." The coalition forces rallied behind him, their combined firepower overwhelming the Thrax flagship. Explosions erupted in every direction as the ship began to break apart, the Thrax realizing too late that they were losing. With a final surge of energy, the flagship crumbled under the relentless assault, its destruction sending shockwaves through the remaining Thrax forces. The echoes of battle gradually faded, replaced by the hum of systems returning to normal aboard the Intrepid. Ethan stood on the bridge, the gravity of their recent victory sinking in. The coalition had emerged triumphant against the Thrax, but the cost was heavy, and the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. "Status report," Ethan commanded, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within him. Mira was at her console, her eyes scanning the data streaming in. "We've taken some hits, but the ship is operational. Damage control teams are assessing the situation. Coalition forces are regrouping and reporting minimal casualties compared to what we anticipated." Ethan felt a surge of relief wash over him. "That's good to hear. Any word on the Thrax?" "Most of their remaining vessels are retreating," she replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "But some are still engaging in skirmishes. We should secure the area and assist our allies." "Agreed," Ethan said, his mind racing with thoughts of the coalition's next steps. "Let's coordinate with the other ships and ensure we don't lose any more ground." As Mira reached out to the fleet, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Thrax would regroup and come back stronger. Their defeat today was only a chapter in an ongoing war. Within moments, the bridge buzzed with activity as the communication channels crackled to life. Ethan turned to face the display, where the faces of various commanders appeared, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Commanders, this is Ethan of the Intrepid," he began, his voice steady. Today, we fought fiercely and emerged victorious. But we cannot afford to let our guard down. We must assess our situation and prepare for any potential counteroffensive from the Thrax. General Corrin's image flickered on the screen. Ethan, you're right. We need to solidify our position and ensure that we're ready for whatever comes next. Let's assign ships to patrol the area and maintain a presence while we regroup. We should also gather the intel from today's battle, Mira added. Understanding their strategies and weaknesses will be crucial moving forward. Good idea, Tharok interjected. We need a debriefing to analyze our successes and mistakes. Knowledge is our best weapon in the coming fights. Ethan nodded, grateful for the unity among the commanders. Let's coordinate those efforts and ensure that we share our findings. We've learned a lot today, and we need to use that knowledge to our advantage. As the meeting wrapped up and the commanders began to disperse, Ethan felt the weight of the battle settle heavily on his shoulders. He turned to Mira, who was deep in thought. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion of the day. "Just thinking about what we've been through. We won, but at what cost? I can't shake the feeling that we haven't seen the last of the Thrax." "I know what you mean," Ethan said, his expression somber. "But today we showed them we can fight back. We stood together when it mattered." Mira nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the viewport where the stars twinkled against the darkness of space. "I just hope it's enough. The Thrax are relentless." "We'll be ready for them," Ethan assured her. "We have a coalition now. We're stronger together, and we'll find a way to turn this war in our favor." Hours passed as the coalition forces began to regroup, sharing stories of their experiences and assessing the aftermath of the battle. Ethan and Mira joined the teams working to repair the Intrepid, moving through the ship with a sense of purpose. "Ethan, we need to check the engines," Mira suggested as they entered the engine room, the familiar hum of machinery filling the air. Together, they inspected the systems, making adjustments where necessary. The ship had held up well, but there were always improvements to be made. "Do you think we'll have time to repair everything before the Thrax come back?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. "We will," Ethan replied, his confidence unwavering. "We have great engineers and the best crew. We can handle this." As they worked, Ethan felt a sense of urgency growing within him. He knew they had to make plans for the future, to prepare for whatever the Thrax might throw at them next. "Let's head to the command center," he suggested after they finished their work. "We need to be in the loop for any updates on the situation." Mira nodded, and together they made their way through the bustling corridors of the Intrepid. Crew members rushed past them, the energy of purpose palpable in the air. They were a team, united in their mission, and it fueled Ethan's resolve. When they reached the command center, Ethan found a gathering of leaders discussing their next steps. Tharok stood at the head of the table, addressing the group with his usual poise. "Thanks for joining us," he said as Ethan and Mira approached. "We're currently analyzing the battle data, and we need to decide our next course of action." "What do we know so far?" Ethan asked, taking a seat at the table. "Intelligence reports indicate that the Thrax are regrouping at a nearby asteroid belt," Tharok explained. "They're likely plotting their next move, and we need to anticipate it." Mira leaned in, her expression serious. "We can't underestimate them. They'll want revenge for today's losses." General Corrin spoke up. "I propose we send a reconnaissance team to gather more intel. If we can determine their numbers and plans, we can better prepare for a potential counterattack." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him. "I'll volunteer for the reconnaissance mission. Mira and I can lead the team." "Are you sure?" Tharok asked, concern etched on his face. "It's dangerous out there." "I understand the risks, but we need to know what we're facing," Ethan replied, determination hardening his voice. "If we can gather critical information, it could give us the upper hand." "All right," Tharok said, his expression firm. "If you're both willing, I'll support your decision, but be careful. The Thrax won't go down without a fight." As the meeting concluded, Ethan and Mira began preparing for their reconnaissance mission. They gathered their gear and reviewed the data on the Thrax forces, trying to anticipate any potential dangers. "Mira, you ready for this?" Ethan asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "I am," she replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We've faced worse together. We can handle whatever the Thrax throw at us." With a nod, Ethan felt a swell of confidence. They were a formidable team, and together they could face anything. As they prepared to depart, Ethan took a moment to look out at the stars. The battle they had fought was just one of many in this ongoing war, and he knew the stakes were only going to rise. Once the Intrepid was ready, Ethan and Mira boarded with a small crew of trusted allies. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the mission pressing down on them. "All right, everyone, listen up," Ethan said, addressing the crew. "Our primary objective is to gather intel on the Thrax forces. We need to know their numbers and any plans they may have. Stay sharp and communicate effectively." As they launched into space, Ethan felt the familiar thrill of adventure coursing through him. The mission was fraught with danger, but it was also filled with the promise of discovery. "Mira, set a course for the asteroid belt," he instructed. "Let's see what we can find." "On it," she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. The Intrepid moved smoothly through the void, the familiar hum of the engines comforting. As they approached the asteroid belt, Ethan marveled at the sight. The rocky formations loomed ahead, casting long shadows across the expanse of space. "Keep the sensors on high alert," he instructed, eyes scanning the surroundings. "We need to be ready for anything." Mira nodded, her focus unwavering. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures ahead. Could be Thrax ships." "Let's get closer," Ethan said, determination sparking within him. "We need to gather as much information as we can." As they navigated through the asteroid field, the Intrepid glided silently between the rocks. Ethan felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. They were entering dangerous territory, and every instinct warned him to remain vigilant. Suddenly, an alert blared from the control panel. "Incoming vessels," Mira shouted, her voice tense. "They've spotted us." Ethan's heart raced as he quickly maneuvered the Intrepid, veering behind an asteroid for cover. "Get ready for evasive maneuvers," he shouted. The sound of approaching Thrax ships filled the air, their ominous silhouettes cutting through the darkness. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on him as he prepared for the confrontation. "Mira, lock onto their ships," he commanded, adrenaline surging through his veins. "We need to gather intel, but we can't let them overwhelm us." She worked quickly, scanning the Thrax vessels and relaying the information to Ethan. "They're heavily armed and seem to be in formation." The stars twinkled brightly against the vastness of space, a serene backdrop to the chaos that had unfolded. The Intrepid drifted among its coalition allies, now anchored in a secured sector, the atmosphere aboard a mix of relief and lingering tension. Ethan stood on the bridge, gazing out at the stars. The recent battle against the Thrax had shifted the tide in their favor, but he knew this war was far from over. They had secured crucial intelligence that revealed the Thrax's future plans and locations, but a new threat loomed on the horizon. Mira entered the bridge, her expression thoughtful. "We did it, Ethan. We gathered the intel we needed, and the coalition is stronger than ever." He turned to her, a mixture of pride and uncertainty in his eyes. "We've won this round, but we still need to prepare for the next. The Thrax will retaliate." "True," she replied, her gaze steady. "But we're not alone anymore. We have allies who believe in our cause. Together, we can stand against them." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The coalition had formed a bond that transcended their differences, united by a common goal. It was a fragile peace, but it was hope. As the crew celebrated their victory in the common area, laughter and camaraderie filled the air. Ethan took a moment to step outside the bustling scene, leaning against the ship's railing, his thoughts drifting. Mira joined him, sensing his need for solitude. "You okay?" she asked softly. Just thinking, Ethan replied, watching the stars. About everything we've faced. About what lies ahead. We've been through so much, and we've come out stronger, she said, her voice filled with warmth. But we can't forget the sacrifices made along the way. I won't forget, Ethan said, a shadow crossing his face. We lost good people in this fight. Mira placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We honor their memories by continuing to fight. They believed in this cause just as much as we do. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility lift slightly. You're right. We owe it to them to keep pushing forward. Days turned into weeks as the coalition regrouped and strategized. The data gathered from the Thrax ship provided invaluable insights, allowing them to fortify their defenses and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. In a joint meeting with coalition leaders, Ethan presented their findings. With this intelligence, we can anticipate their movements and strike at their weak points. We need to be strategic in our approach. General Corrin nodded. We've learned from our mistakes. This time, we're ready for whatever they throw at us. As plans solidified, a sense of unity permeated the coalition. Leaders from different factions worked together, sharing resources and strategies, their combined strength a formidable force against the Thrax. Despite the preparations, a calm settled over the Intrepid and its crew. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of normalcy. Crew members spent time together, sharing stories and forging bonds that would last beyond the battles. Ethan and Mira found moments to relax amidst the chaos, their connection deepening as they navigated the challenges ahead. They shared laughter over meals and quiet conversations under the stars, the weight of their responsibilities momentarily forgotten. One evening, as they gazed at the stars, Mira turned to Ethan, her eyes reflecting the light. Whatever happens next, we face it together. I wouldn't want anyone else by my side. Neither would I, Ethan replied, his heart full. No matter what the Thrax throw at us, we're ready. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. The coalition scouts reported an imminent Thrax fleet approaching, their ships looming on the horizon like shadows ready to engulf them. Ethan stood on the bridge, adrenaline coursing through him as he prepared the crew for battle. This is it, everyone. We've trained for this moment. Let's show the Thrax that we won't back down. Mira, at the controls, shot him a determined look. We've got this. We're stronger together. As the Intrepid and its allies engaged the Thrax fleet, the vastness of space erupted into chaos. Energy blasts illuminated the darkness, ships weaving in and out of formation, their crews fighting for survival. Ethan fought alongside his crew, his heart racing with every explosion and maneuver. They pushed forward, determination fueling their every move. The battle raged on, fierce and relentless. Ethan and Mira fought side by side, their trust in each other unwavering. Together, they faced wave after wave of Thrax forces, their resolve tested but unbroken. As the final Thrax ship fell, a wave of relief washed over the battlefield. The coalition had emerged victorious, but not without loss. They mourned the fallen, their sacrifices a stark reminder of the price of freedom. In the aftermath, Ethan and Mira stood together on the bridge, gazing out at the wreckage of the battlefield. We did it, Mira said, her voice a whisper. Yes, but at a cost, Ethan replied, the weight of their victory heavy on his heart. We must honor those who fought alongside us. With the Thrax defeated, the coalition began to rebuild. New alliances formed, and a shared vision for the future emerged. Ethan and Mira took on leadership roles, guiding their allies toward a brighter tomorrow. As they stood together, gazing at the stars, Ethan felt a sense of hope blooming within him. They had fought for their freedom, and now they had the chance to create a new legacy. Mira, we've come so far, he said, a smile breaking through the weight of their journey. This is just the beginning. She returned his smile, her eyes sparkling with determination. Together, we can face anything. The universe is ours to explore. As they looked out into the endless expanse of space, the stars shimmered like a promise, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope would always find a way to shine through. And so, with hearts full of hope and a coalition united in purpose, they set their sights on the horizon, ready to embrace the adventures that lay ahead. The end.